The story begins in the quiet hours before dawn, over a range of snow-capped mountains, even before the birds wake to flap their wings. In a desolate alleyway, a lone figure collapses onto the cold stone ground with a paint groan. He stirs slowly, pushing himself up from under a green blanket, clutching his head. He winces as a dull ache throbs behind his eyes. As his vision clears, he finds a small child kneeling before him. The child looks at him with wide, curious eyes and wishes him a good morning. Wide and in shock, startled by the unexpected company, he can only manage a hesitant, questioning sound. When realization dawns on him, he frantically checks the pouch at his side, only to find it empty. His expression hardens as he glares at the child and leaps to his feet. He crouches down to face them, his voice sharp with accusation as he demands to know what they did with his money. The child, startled, stammers that they did nothing. His voice rises to a shout, ordering the child not to lie. He specifies that there were 4 gold coins in his pouch and demands to know where they went. The child insists, their voice trembling, that they didn't take them. He lunges, grabbing the child by the collar of their tunic. Tears stream down the child's face as they choke out that they are telling the truth. His anger falters, replaced by confusion. He questions the child again, asking that if they didn't use the money, then why is it gone? Tears streaming down the child's face. They looked up and spoke with a trembling voice, explaining that he should use the money to buy them. They sat on the grimy floor, their small bare feet covered in dirt. Hearing this, the man's eyes widened in disbelief, his mind struggling to process the child's words. A memory surfaced of a grand building. He recalled the conversation, questioning if he had truly bought the child and receiving an affirmative answer. The memory sharpened, focusing on the child's frail and filthy state. He remembered paying for them, thinking to himself what a small, skinny thing they were. A child who seemed on the verge of death. Snapping back to the present, he clutched his head in anguish. The realization was impossible, unthinkable. He desperately tried to piece together what had happened the day before. Memory took him back to the previous day. It had been the capital's annual festival, the night sky lit by fireworks. He recalled that after returning from the dungeon, his party had stopped at a trading company to sell their loot. Wind spirit stones, amulets, jewels, and a small, magic-resistant silver shield. The total for all their items came to a hefty sum, 25 gold coins, stacked neatly on a tray. He remembered his companions' cheerful faces. They have been eager to celebrate their earnings, suggesting they all go for a toast and have a big celebration. His own expression, however, was somber. As his party invited him to join them for a drink, he had turned away, backpack in hand, choosing to go his own way instead of celebrating with him. He had waved them off, declining their invitation to celebrate. "Nah, I'll pass," he told them, promising to see them later. As he walked away, his blonde companion watched him go, accompanied by another man with an eye patch. The man with the eye patch remarked that Harris wasn't very social. As usual, the companion defended him, suggesting that was just how thieves were. He found his way to a tavern, choosing a solitary table to nurse his thoughts before moving on. Eventually he moved to the bar, ordering an ale and a snack from the woman working there, who promptly went to fetch. Leaning on the counter, a bitter thought crossed his mind. He internally apologized for being a thief, a label he clearly resented, knowing his official class at the Adventurers Guild was Scalp. His role was crucial, yet unglamorous. He was the one who detected and disarmed hidden traps, ensuring doors and chests were safe to open. He identified valuable items, mapped the twisting corridors of dungeons, and spotted enemies before they could ambush the party. Despite this, he knew what they said behind his back, that his work was no different from common bandits. A useless role when it came to actual combat. The thought soured his mood further. It wasn't that he minded drinking, he mused while tapping his fingers on the wind bar. It was that he found no joy in drinking with them. When the bartender returned with his ale, he offered a quiet thanks. He admitted to himself that he might have joined the others if it meant a chance to get closer to Elia, the priestess, or Asia, the mage. But he quickly dismissed the notion, convinced that such women would never spare a glance for someone they viewed as a filthy bandit. The bartender simply wished him well. His gaze then shifted to the bartender. With a sudden change in demeanor, he leaned in with a sly smile, asking when her shift ended. Taking it back, she questioned if he was trying to hit on her. He held her gaze, a playful glint in his eyes as he considered the question. Let's see, he murmured, leaving a possibility hanging in the air. He listens as the bartender apologetically explains her situation. With a gentle smile, she tells him that due to a festival, she must work until morning. His expression remains pleasant as he processes her words. Taking a sip from his mug, he hears her wish him a pleasant time drinking. Without another word, he leaves the tavern. As he steps out, the bartender calls after him about his change, but he dismisses it, saying there's no need. Walking alone down the street, he wonders aloud if he truly looks shabby. His frustration mounts, and he curses as he kicks a loose stone from his path. He finds himself amid of a bustling festival crowd. A new thought takes hold. He has money, so he'll simply go and purchase the company of a high-class prostitute. Search leads him to an opulent building where two women wave from a window. He approaches the man at the door and states his business plainly, confirming he has the money to buy a girl. The stern-looking proprietor crosses his arms, unimpressed. He informs Harris that the establishment's payment is in gold coins and suggests that whatever country he's from, he has come to the wrong store. With a dismissive sneer, the man points down the road, suggesting he tried the street over there, where a line of shops caters to customers more suited to his station. Harris's temper snaps. He grabs the man's cloak, shouting not to be looked down upon, and insisting he has the money. He demands to be let inside. In response, the proprietor effortlessly seizes him and hurls him out of the establishment, sending him crashing onto the street outside. He was met with a final, sneering dismissal. The brothel owner leaned in close, telling him that he didn't fit in and ordering him to get out of his face, adding that it wouldn't matter even if he could pay. Passed out and alone, he sought solace in a flask. As fireworks burst across the night sky, illuminating the joyous faces of the festival crowd, he could only slump over in despair. His drunken wandering led him to stumble into a brightly lit shop, where he clumsily knocked over a display of goods, startling the patrons inside. The commotion drew immediate anger. One of the men shouted at him to watch where he was going, calling him an idiot. A woman nearby grimaced, remarking on the foul stench of alcohol, while the shopkeeper demanded he get out of the way. In response, a low, bitter laugh escaped his lips, driven back into the streets. He found a moment of respite by a barrel, but the festive atmosphere only grated on his nerves. The fireworks, the crowds, the noise. He found it all disgusting, a pounding headache mirroring his inner turmoil as he cursed his situation. He walked on, the weight of his isolation pressing down on him. It felt as if there was no place that would accept him, that every single person had made fun of him. A quiet, defeated apology escaped him as he clutched a piece of straw. His aimless wandering came to an abrupt halt, down a dark, brick-lined alley, away from the celebratory lights. His eyes fell upon a small, huddled figure. It was a child, thin and covered in grime. A heavy chain locked around their ankle and secured to a thick wind post. The child looked up, their large eyes meeting his gaze. He stood motionless, the vibrant explosions of the festival fireworks in the sky. Behind him, a stark, silent contrast to the grim reality he had just discovered in the shadows of the out. Far away, a vast range of snow-capped mountains stretches across the horizon under cloudy sky. A wave of nausea and regret washes over Harris as he clutches his head, the morning light feeling like an assault. He slowly pieces it together. He got drunk the night before, stumbled past the slave market, and in his stupor, bought the child now sitting quietly before him. The object of his regret is a pitiable sight, a thin body with ribs clearly visible, covered in grime, and marked by a large wound from a blade on her cheek. She looks up at him and asks if he remembers the way. The question only deepens his frustration as he realizes he spent 3 gold coins on her, enough money to live comfortably for 2 months. His regret leads him back to the slave trader's establishment. The stout merchant notes that Harris wants to return the child. Harris apologizes, blaming his drunkenness, and offers to pay the necessary document fee. But the trader grimly states that this is a problem. The man considers Harris's plea, then makes an offer. He will take her back for a mere 10 silver coins. Harris recoils in shock, shouting that the amount is only 1/5 of what he originally paid. Child stands silently as the trader explains the cold logic of his business. The value of such a child is low, and he needs money to maintain his stock. If she were to die, it would be a huge loss. If he takes her back, he will simply sell her to the show house. The term is unfamiliar to Harris. The trader callously adds that used goods aren't worth much anyway, a statement that hangs in the air as the child stands barefoot on the dusty ground. The trader elaborates on the grim reality of the show house. It's an arena where they release ogres to hunt and kill children for sport. It was a gruesome spectacle where ogres devoured children who were too tired to run, a disgusting entertainment for the wealthy. The trader admits it's a miserable business either way, then looks Harris in the eye and asks what he intends to do. He sits heavily by a public fountain, gulping down water with ragged breaths, the weight of his recent choice pressing down on him. Nearby, the small child watches him in silence. After quenching his own thirst, he offers the cup to her, telling her that she should drink too. She looks up at him, her expression unreadable, and accepts. He then instructs her to wash her face. A quiet resignation settles in as he thinks to himself that, in the end, He couldn't abandon her. He brought her here instead. As the child cleans herself at the fountain's edge, he slumps over, head in his hand. The reality of his situation crashes down on him. He has an additional burden and no money to speak of. A small voice cuts through his despair. The child, her face now clean, looks up at him with a faint smile and offers a sincere thank you. He is taken aback, noticing for the first time that her face isn't so bad after all. The quiet moment is shattered by a loud, rumbling growl from the child's stomach. She flinches, clasping her hands together in embarrassment. Her reaction is immediate and fearful. She begins to stammer an apology, her eyes wide with panic. As she gestures with her hands, his gaze falls upon a strange mark branded onto her left forearm. She curls into a small ball on the stone ground, repeating her apologies over and over. He watches her, his expression hardening as he begins to understand the terror she must have lived through. Instead of reacting with anger, he simply states that she must be hungry. He holds out a piece of roasted meat, a simple offering. She stares at the food, then back at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Slowly, hesitantly, she accepts the offering and begins to eat. She tears into the cooked meat with a desperate hunger. Watching her, Harris's expression hardens as a grim thought crosses his mind. He can only imagine the horrific treatment she must have endured. He continues to observe as she sits hunched over on a cobblestones, completely absorbed in her first proper meal in what must have been a very long time. The simple kindness of the food overwhelms her. Tears begin to well up in her eyes, and soon they're streaming down her face as she continues to clutch the meal. The tears become unrestrained sobs, a raw and painful release of long-suppressed misery and fear. As the emotional storm subsides, she uses her free hand to wipe the tears from her face, her small body trembling slightly. Having finished every last scrap of meat, she now holds the clean bone. Harris, sitting nearby, resigns himself to his decision. He's already bought her. There's no turning back. He concludes that if he is to keep her, he must at least ensure she is well fed and properly clothed, musing that raising her into a proper woman might not be a bad idea. He gets her attention and then asks for her name. She looks up, startled for a moment, before quietly answering that she is called Tiana. A warm smile spreads across his face as he acknowledges her name. He then introduces himself as Harris. Now standing before her with a large pack on his back, Harris makes a formal declaration. He states that from this day forward, he will be her master. Looking up at him from her spot by a fountain, Tiana's eyes widen with a glimmer of hope as she agrees. Harris looks down at the small, disheveled child, Tiana, who clasps her hands nervously. He decides they will have to do something about her situation, and give a simple command: follow me. The child walks barefoot across the cobblestone streets of the town. She trails a few paces behind Harris as he leads them through the bustling populace. Her small form stark contrast to the man guiding her. Their path takes them to a grand, ornate temple, where a woman's voice calls out his name in recognition. Belongs to Aaliyah, a priestess. She greets him with a warm smile, remarking that it's rare to see him at the temple and wishing they could have celebrated his return the previous night. Harris acknowledges her, and she explains to Tiana that Aaliyah is a priestess who offers healing, but also sometimes joins adventurers in dungeons. He then asks what he can do for her, in response. He gestures to the child beside him, asking Ilya to heal her wounds. He explains that while she has many scars on her face and arms, the injuries on her back are far worse. Ilya's expression shifts to one of deep concern. As she gently takes Tiana's hands, the sight of the marks prompts a horrified question. Was Harris the one responsible? The accusation hangs in the air and Harris's face contorts with shock and anger at the cruel assumption. Silence is taken as confirmation. Elia's demeanor turns cold as she concludes that he is living up to his reputation as a thief. She declares that she misjudged him, finding it abhorrent that he would harm a defenseless child. As she speaks, Harris clenches his fist, a familiar frustration boiling within him. He thinks about how few things truly anger him, but this is one of them. Before he can respond, Tiana erupts, shouting that Aaliyah is wrong. With tears welling in her eyes, she passionately defends him, insisting her master would never do such a thing. Her sudden fierce loyalty stuns both Harris and the priestess in a silence. She continued her defense, explaining to the priestess that Harris had put his own cloak on her when she was shivering, and had given her his own food. She stated firmly that her wound was not his fault. Her voice thick with emotion, she declared that her master was a very kind person. Harris watched, stunned by her words, as the priestess quietly acknowledged the truth. Overcome with shame, Elia bowed her head. She apologized for the misunderstanding and her harsh words, admitting that it was inexcusable for a servant of God to lash out in such a way, then turned to Harris, offering a sincere apology. He dismissed it with a wave, telling her it was fine. Taking Tia on his hand, Aaliyah promised to take full responsibility for the child's treatment and led her away, inside the quiet halls of the temple. The priestess asked for the child's name. The girl replied that she was Tiana. Elias smiled, calling it a lovely name and introducing herself in turn. Not preparing to treat the wounds, she warned Tiana that the cleaning might sting. As the water touched her skin, the child cried out from the sharp sensation. Elia gently soothed her, explaining the necessity of cleaning the wound before the treatment could begin, and asking her to endure it for a little longer. Tiana quietly agreed as the priestess carefully washed the grime from her hair and back. The priestess's voice filled the quiet room as she apologized again, this time for the emotional distress Tiana had to endure during the earlier confrontation. She continued to reflect on her own failings, admitting that it is a disgraceful act for a priestess to despise someone for their appearance or to accuse them of crimes without justification. As Aaliyah tended to her back, Tiana asked why she was with Harris. The question seemed to stir a deep memory in a priestess. A single tear traced a path down her cheek as she began to speak of a time when she was little. As Elia prepared to speak, Tiana's own story came forth first. She explained that after monsters killed her father, she was sold into servitude. Life became a daily torment of being kicked, stepped on, and whipped, a constant agony she could not escape. The proof of her words was etched upon her back in a series of terrible scars. Elia looked on, her expression shifting to one of pained understanding as she stammered, acknowledging how grievous the wounds were. Despite the horror, Tiana's tale shifted. She told Elia how glad she was when her new master bought her, because he treated her so well. Tears streamed down her face as she concluded with newfound conviction, believing that because of him, she would be fine from now on. Moved by the child's story, Elia gently pulled her into a warm embrace, causing Tiana to let out a soft gasp of surprise. She held Tiana close, affirming that the child was right and would be fine. Elia praised her for enduring so much hardship while keeping her soul's light pure, adding her belief that God would always watch over her. Meanwhile, in a vast and empty hall, Harris sat alone, lost in thought. He considered Tiana's fierce defense of him, muttering to himself that he would never do such a thing. The child's earnest words echoed in his mind, her tearful declaration that her master is a very kind person. He let out a weary sigh, turning his head. The weight of her faith was heavy, and he wondered aloud why someone would trust him so completely after knowing him for only a day. Later, the wait was over. Ilya appeared with a smiling Tiana, whose skin was now completely clear of any wounds or scars. The priestess announced that the treatment was complete, apologizing for the delay. She had other siblings, but was the only one sold in a hardship. Elia explained to Harris that after the girl's real father passed away, her stepfather deemed her useless. Harris listened, his gaze fixed on the child, realizing the depth of suffering she had endured in her life. He promised he would. Elia smiled, asking him to take good care of the child. She confessed that her eyes had been clouded before, and she hadn't realized what a wonderful person he was. Harris, however, deflected the praise, admitting that he had an ulterior motive. Before he could elaborate, Elia asked him to wait a moment. She reached into the top of her robes, causing Harris to startle as she announced she had found what she was looking for. She then presented him with a small, ornate object. It felt warm in his gloved hand as he asked what it was. Elia identified it as one of the temple's friendship signs. His eyes widened in disbelief, recognizing the significance of the gift. Elia confirmed his unspoken question, explaining that the sign would grant him free treatment at any temple. She clasped her hands together, insisting it was a token of her gratitude. Harris stared at the sign, his mind reeling as he recalled the rumors. An item like this was worth 100 gold coins. His stunned silence was met with a warm smile from Elia. She explained that he had reminded her of a temple commandment, to never judge a person by their appearance or occupation. Even among those who use skills like lockpicking, she mused, they're good people. She also waived a fee for Tiana's treatment. Harris, overwhelmed by this complete misunderstanding of his character, could only cover his face in embarrassment while Tiana looked on. Having made their farewells, the two prepared to depart. Harris, now shouldering a large pack, announced their plan. They would be camping outside for a few days, and she must not fall behind. Tiana eagerly agreed, and they set off from the town. As they walked along the open road, Harris checked on her. He asked how her leg felt, and Tiana skipped ahead slightly, cheerfully reporting that it was easy to walk now that it was healed. Curiosity piqued. Tiana then asked what kind of work her master did. Harris gazed ahead into the woods, considering the question before answering simply that he was an adventurer. He explains to Tiana the nature of his work as an adventurer. He'll do anything for money, from forming parties to delve into dungeons, to taking on requests to carry important documents or find things. His eyes sparkle with admiration, exclaiming that it's amazing he can do everything. Harris confirms a bit sheepishly. She then points to the weapon at his side, asking if he uses it. He admits that he does, sometimes, but clarifies that he's just doing simple jobs compared to warriors and mages who are better suited for combat. As they continue their journey, the sun begins to set. He announces that they will make camp for the night after they get a little further up the road. Venturing into the woods, he carries Tiana to make better time. Suddenly, he comes to a dead stop, a sharp exclamation escaping his lips as he holds a finger to his mouth, signaling for silence. Tiana, startled, calls out to him in a hushed, questioning tone. His expression hardens as he scans the path ahead. It seems he realizes that their attempt to take a shortcut has backfired. Before them stand two hulking, horned creatures, their brutish faces twisted into menacing expressions. Harris and Tiana look up at the unexpected threat, their journey brought to an abrupt and dangerous halt. Deep within the woods, Harris spots three figures in the distance. He notes that there's still some space between them and wonders if they should hide and wait for them to pass, assuming they haven't been seen. His expression hardens as he recognizes the grotesque, tusked visage of an orc. Vile thoughts become apparent. It catalogues its potential prey. Women, men, a little girl. Its mind settling on the singular, brutal act of rape. Harris recoils in disgust and fury, a curse escaping his lips. Without a moment's hesitation, he sweeps Tiana off her feet and into his arms. She cries out his title in surprise, but he quickly tells her to hold on and be quiet lest she bite her tongue. He breaks into a full sprint, plunging deeper into the forest. Feet pound against the earth. He realizes they've run into a troublesome group. 3 orcs. If he were by himself, he thinks he could probably handle it. But with Tiana, escape is the only option. The pursuers, however, are not moving quickly. One of the orcs observes that their prey has a good sense of smell, allowing them to maintain distance. But it won't matter. Their obsession is abnormally strong. They will continue the chase for 2 or 3 days, if necessary. He understands their tactic all too well. They will simply use their superior strength and stamina to wear him down until he is too exhausted to run any further. A grunt of pain and effort escapes him as he pushes onward. Tiana watches him, his face strained and slick with sweat as he gasps for air. Her gaze drifts down and her eyes widen in alarm. A dark patch of blood is spreading across the front of his tunic. She calls out to him, her voice filled with concern. "Master? What's wrong?" she asks, her hands clasped worriedly. "That I hurt you somewhere." Offers a sad, gentle smile. "Please leave me behind," she pleads. Tiana explains that if she stays, she believes she can buy him some time, because at their current pace, their pursuers will inevitably catch up to them both. He stops abruptly, his expression hardening with anger. "Don't be an idiot," he snaps. "Do you know what happens when they catch you?" He demands, his voice sharp with the unspoken horror of that fate. He listens as Tiana, tears streaming down her face, insists that it's her fault. She pleads, not wanting him to die because of her. Harris, looking exhausted, apologizes for his inability to protect her, but asks her to listen to him. Placing a reassuring hand on her head, he asks if she really thought he was just running to get them killed. He explains that he wasn't fleeing blindly. The area is full of useful materials. He reveals that a trap is already set, clarifying that while he's no professional, he is still an amateur hunter. Rises to his feet, drawing a short blade. With a confident smirk, he declares that a thief has his own way of fighting, and he is about to demonstrate it. Tiana gazes up at him, her tear-filled eyes now wide with hope. Meanwhile, their pursuers, the 2 orcs and their human companion, continue their relentless hunt through the woods, closing in on their quarry. Human man pauses, sniffing air. He detects a familiar scent and identifies it as that of a woman. His eyes lock onto a tree in the distance. He points, indicating that the scent originates from that direction. As the larger orc cautiously peers around the trunk, the man gives his command. Find a woman, and then they can have their way with her. The creature spots the child's tunic hanging from a branch, a clear lure. Believing he's found her, he lunges forward, but his foot snags on a hidden rope. The trap springs shut with a violent snap, and he bellows in pain. He is violently yanked upside down, his leg caught fast in the snare, dangling helplessly from the tree. He can only grunt in frustration. His companions watch the spectacle. The human man curses him for his foolishness. while the other orc jeers that a woman managed to outsmart him. From his suspended position, the ensnared orc roars in fury, promising to tear the little girl apart. He thrashes violently against the trap, his two companions watching as the rope digs into his flesh. Attempt to free him. The stout man pulls on a rope, but this only causes the trap to spring. The large orc cries out as he is suddenly hoisted into the air. The rope snaps, sending the work crashing down onto a sharpened stake hidden beneath the leaves. He gasps in pain, impaled through the back. His companions stare in shock, the stout man muttering in disbelief and calling for help. From the shadows of the trees, Harris watches his trap succeed. Before the others can react, Harris emerges from the darkness. He grabs the dying orc's head and swiftly slits its throat, ending its suffering and ensuring its silence. The remaining two pursuers are frozen in place, stunned by the brutal efficiency of the attack. The stout man pants, his face a mask of terror and disbelief as he stares at the grisly scene. His fear is quickly replaced by fury in his remaining companion. The smaller orc lets out a guttural roar and charges forward, intent on avenging his fallen comrade. As he rushes onward, a high-pitched shriek suddenly pierces the air, followed by the sound of frantic rustling in the nearby trees. The unexpected sound brings him to a halt. He turns his gaze towards a dark cave, opening nestled in the rocks. His expression, hardening with murderous intent. He vows to kill whoever is hiding there. A small pebble clatters onto the ground near his foot, tossed from the direction of the cave. The distraction works, and he grits his teeth, repeating his vow to kill. Is target now clear? The enraged orc abandons his human companion and charges headlong towards the dark maw of the cave. Growls, startled by a faint sound echoing from deeper within the cave. Sweat beads on his brow as he peers into the oppressive darkness, trying to locate the source of the disturbance. The small projectile strikes his leg, barely in nuisance, but the surprise of it ignites his fury. He whirls around, roaring in anger, spotting movement further in the shadows. Enraged, he abandons all caution, charging headlong into the darkness. He pants heavily, driven by a singular desire to crush whatever dared to provoke, as he thunders past a rocky outcrop. Harris remains perfectly still in the shadows, letting the beast pass. He gives a subtle hand signal, confirming the trap is sprung. With the creature's back exposed, Harris lunges from his hiding place. He lands squarely on the orc's shoulders, driving his knife with grim determination deep into the side of its neck. The massive body collapses onto the cave floor, lifeless. Harris steps away from the fallen pursuer, the immediate danger now neutralized. He takes a moment to compose himself, wiping the creature's blood from his cheek before pouring water from his skin over his head, washing away the filth of the encounter. After washing away the grime, he turns his attention back to the darkness of the cave. He calls out Tiana's name, asking if she's all right. A small, hesitant voice answers in the affirmative. Tiana emerges from hiding, wrapped in a red cloak. Harris admits he was scared when he heard her scream. She apologizes, explaining that she nearly tripped on a tree root and had to muffle her voice. Relieved that she is safe, Harris observes that her old clothes are gone, and tells her she cannot wear them back. Their immediate ordeal concluded, a quiet falls over the forest, illuminated by the light of the full moon. She sits with Tiana by a crackling campfire, the darkness of a surrounding forest held at bay by the flickering light. The immediate danger has passed, and a quiet calm settles over their small camp, breaking the silence. Tiana looks at him with wide, earnest eyes, expressing her awe at his recent display of skill. She admits that when they were being chased, she truly believed they were finished, dismisses her praise, turning his attention to the food roasting over the flames. He explains that orcs don't have good eyesight. Instead, they rely on their keen sense of smell to track prey. While fighting three at once would have been a difficult struggle, he knew they could manage by eliminating them one at a time. He continues detailing the strategy. The main problem was creating a distraction to isolate the first one. He turns to Tiana, a slight smile on his face, and tells her it was all thanks to her. He admits her sudden decision to remove her clothes surprised him, but it was her scent on the discarded tunic that drew the orc's attention, creating the perfect opening. Tiana looks back, surprised by the credit. He offers her the cooked food, instructing her to eat and rest before they continue their journey in the morning. Overwhelmed with relief and happiness, she accepts with a bright, beaming smile. Under the light of the full moon, a sense of peace settles between them. Their journey together continues. They share meals, travel long distances on foot with Harris carrying their supplies, find shelter from the rain, and rest side by side when exhaustion takes them. After some time, they come to stop on a grassy hill. Harris's boot stands firm on the ground as he directs her gaze forward, telling her to look. Following his gesture, Tiana looks out upon a large walled town nestled in a valley by a river. Harris announces its name, Norn, and declares that this is the town where they will live. Its walls are thick stone, with an arched gateway providing entry. A heavy chain hangs across the archway, suggesting a portcullis or gate mechanism. Passing through the town's entrance, they walk along a stone-paved road, making their way deeper into their new home. Their walk leads them to a quieter part of town where Harris stops and gestures ahead. He announces that they have arrived, telling a wide-eyed Tiana that this is their house. It is a modest 2-story stone cottage with shuttered windows and chimneys, giving a sturdy but neglected appearance. They push open the door and step inside, crossing the threshold into the damp interior. Once inside, Harris surveys the room, which is furnished but covered in a thick layer of dust. Tiana quietly observes that it's dusty. He turns to her, pulling off his gloves. He explains that he is going out for a bit and instructs her to take care of things while he is gone. Tiana agrees, and as he says her name, her expression is solemn. She watches him go, her expression thoughtful. As he stands in the doorway, Harris gives one last instruction. She is not to touch the chest in the other room. Tiana quietly affirms that she understands and wishes him a good day before the door clicks shut, leaving her alone. He makes his way to the Norn Adventures Guild. At the counter, he presents a small pouch to the clerk, stating he wants the reward for the orc years within. The clerk is surprised. Harris explains that it's a certificate of conquest for a 5th-tier dungeon, an achievement they will need to register. The clerk asked him to wait while he fetches the reward. As Harris stands by, a man with glasses greets him, noting it's been a long time. The man observes that Harris seems to be hunting monsters now, and asks if he could be introduced to similar jobs. Harris replies that it's nothing new, just the same as always. Later, Harris stands inside the man's shop, a cluttered space filled with various trinkets and tools. He asks the shopkeeper to fix an item for him, and the man readily agrees. He presents a pair of ornate earrings. The shopkeeper examines them, remarking that they look good despite being old. He informs Harris that they will have to replace any damaged parts, a condition Harris accepts without issue. The shopkeeper looks at Harris with a curious smirk, noting that it's rare for him to bring in accessories for repair. He playfully asks if something happened, wondering if he's prying into a customer's affairs. With his arms crossed, Harris curtly tells him to just hurry up and fix them. The man stamps a receipt for the job. He calculates the cost of the repairs at about 3 copper coins and thanks Harris for his patronage. As Harris turns to leave, the shopkeeper tells him to come back for the earrings tomorrow. He adds with a wry grin that while he can fix the jewelry, he can't do anything about Harris's lack of affability. Harris simply tells him to leave him alone and departs. He arrives back at his house later that day. As he approaches the front, a small voice calls out from within, welcoming him home. He steps inside and stops, stunned. The room, which had been empty and covered in dust just hours before, is now immaculately clean and fully furnished with a sofa, a cabinet, and a warm fire crackling in the hearth. He stood in stunned silence, his gaze sweeping over the impossibly clean and furnished room. Seeing his expression, Tiana timidly apologized for cleaning on her own. He quickly reassured her, explaining that he was simply surprised by the sudden change. A relieved smile bloomed on her face. Relief quickly turned to cheerful hospitality. She gestured to a chair, asking her master to take a seat and promising to bring him a meal immediately. The offer of food only added to his bewilderment. Moments later, she presented a steaming wooden bowl of stew. She explained that she had simmered the dried meat left over from their journey with herbs and root vegetables she found growing in the garden. Stare at the food, finally understanding. He had dismissed the plants in the garden as mere weeds. He lifted a spoonful to his lips, tasting a stew as Tiana watched him with hopeful anticipation. The flavor was surprisingly good. He looked at the child and told her plainly that she was a good cook. Overwhelmed by the praise, Tiana blushed deeply, her eyes welling up. Noticing her reaction, he invited her to sit and eat with him. Tiana was taken aback, protesting that she couldn't possibly do that, but he insisted it was fine. After she shyly agreed, he asked her to grab another bowl while she was up. After they finished their meal, Harris leaned back, feeling the day's exhaustion. Tiana asked if he wanted to rest in bed, but he replied that he needed to take a bath first. Without hesitation, she happily offered to prepare it for him right away. As she hurried off, he watched her with a faint, warm smile. He then settled onto the sofa, reclining as he gazed out the window, finally able to relax in his surprisingly comfortable new home. He stood outside by a wooden screen as Tiana's voice called out to him, announcing that the bath was ready. He acknowledged her, replying that he was on his way. Upon seeing the steaming tub of water, He was touched by her consideration. As Tiana addressed him as master, he could only think how thoughtful she was. Just as he was preparing for the bath, her small bare feet padded onto the stone floor behind him. She spoke softly, asking to be excused. His entire body tensed in shock as she held up a soapy sponge and made an unexpected offer to wash his back. The proposition left him utterly stunned. Tiana appears at the doorway with a bright, innocent smile, offering to wash Harris's back. He is caught completely off guard, stammering in surprise at the unexpected proposal. He turns away slightly, asking if he has bothered her, but she quietly reassures him that he hasn't. As he processes her kindness, Harris makes a mental note to feed her more later, feeling a sense of gratitude. But she urges him to hurry, cheerfully reminding him that the bathwater will get cold if he waits too long. Conceding, he agrees and begins to pull off a shirt. His discarded clothes are left neatly on a nearby chair as they prepare for the bath. Now in a bath, Tiana kneels behind Harris, diligently scrubbing his back. She explains her reasoning. Since he had washed her back and it felt so pleasant, she wanted to return the favor. He sits quietly, understanding her simple, heartfelt lodge. She continues, adding with a happy expression that it was just like when Ilya used to wash her. The name makes Harris pause, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. He turns to confirm what he heard, asking if Ilya had washed her. Tiana gives a resounding, cheerful yes. His mind is suddenly flooded with a memory of bathing with Ilya. He recalls her gentle touch, her comment on how strong he looked, and her offer to wash his back to clean it thoroughly. In a vivid recollection, her face is soft and affectionate as she calls his name. His memory then shifts abruptly to a darker place, a dungeon they explored together. He remembers thinking of her as the adventurer's most beautiful flower, a woman with an innocent yet alluring presence. The same delicate hands from the bath are now seen gripping a heavy spiked mace. The memory culminates in a flash of intense combat. Ilya shouts a warning for him to watch out as she unleashes a blinding blast of purifying light. With fierce determination, she vows to purge the filthy demons, yelling for Harris to get back while she shields him from the attack. She remained lost in the memory of Ilya's blinding light, her battle cry echoing in his mind. Tiana's voice, however, pulled him back to the present as she called out to her master. Outside, the night was still, the full moon casting a pale light over the quiet house. Back inside, Harris sat with a drink, his reverie broken. Tiana approached and announced that she was done with her bath, to which he gave a quiet acknowledgement. She stood before him in borrowed clothes that were clearly too large. Tiana admitted they were a bit big, but she couldn't believe he had lent them to her and thanked him sincerely. Setting his cup down, Harris declared it was time to sleep. She bowed her head in response, wishing him a good night before turning and walking away. He watched her depart down the corridor, a flicker of confusion on his face. She called out, asking what she was doing. Tiana, kneeling on a pile of hay, looked back in surprise and asked if she was supposed to sleep in the barn. Her question left him momentarily speechless. Directing her misunderstanding, he led her to a proper bedroom. He gestured to the single bed, stating that while it was small, they would both have to share it. Tiana could only stare in disbelief. She immediately protested, insisting she couldn't sleep in the same bed as him. Harris, however, cut her off with a simple no, explaining that the nights get cold. He then tossed a blanket to her, telling her to use it. He explained that it would be far more troublesome for him if she were to fall ill. With that, he lay down on the bed. Tiana quietly thanked him, and, after a moment's hesitation, excused herself as she cautiously climbed onto the edge of the mattress, clutching the blanket tightly. She hesitantly asks Harris if he doesn't use a blanket, pointing out that the one she's holding is the only one they have. Her concern suddenly sharpens into alarm. She insists that without a blanket he will catch a cold and forcefully tries to cover him with it. She puffs her cheeks, thinking to herself that this chill is nothing compared to the cold inside a dungeon. She continues explaining that he has his work to consider, as well as the long journey they undertook from the capital and many other things to deal with. For all those reasons, she earnestly declares that while he is home, she wants to ensure from the bottom of her heart that he rests well. He lies with his back to her, his voice slightly muffled as he asks if his current arrangement is not good enough. Turns to face her, explaining that he had plenty of time to relax today, crediting her with all the housework. Tiana looks down, admitting that she's not very good at sewing. He responds that since she is a slave, there's no one who would take her as a wife anyway, so her skills don't matter in that regard. She looks up, thanking him. She continues gently, telling her that she doesn't need to be able to do everything right away. He offers simple advice. If she's not good at something, she should practice. And if she can't make clothes, she can simply go to tailor. The straightforward logic strikes her. She realizes he is the first person to ever say something so simple to her. With that settled, Harris muses that he'll need to go shopping tomorrow. Tiana immediately volunteers to go in his place. He asks if she will be all right on her own, and she confidently tells him to leave it to her before sheepishly asking for the location of the shop. They settled in for the night. Harris, already half asleep, promised to draw the map for a shopping trip when he woke. Tiana, nestled beside him, eagerly agreed. Within moments, his breathing evened out as he drifted into slumber. His last words before sleep were a gentle farewell. "Good night, Tiana," he whispered. She held his hand, a look of serene contentment on her face as she closed her eyes. Her own quiet reply followed, a whisper into the night as the moon shone brightly outside. "Good night, master." The city street bustle with activity, a commercial district where one could find all manner of shops and stalls. Amidst the crowd, Tiana bowed her head apologetically to Harris, expressing her regret for making him accompany her. He looked down at her, assuring the child that she wouldn't get lost from this point forward. Watched as she fumbled with a map, admitting with a small voice that she couldn't read it. Harris quickly told her not to worry about it, privately acknowledging his own naivety. Gently patted her head as she lamented her inability to even shop properly. Reassuringly, he reminded her of what he'd said before and explained that she simply needed to learn how to sew, read, and write, taking it one step at a time. Filled with new resolve, Tiana agreed, promising to do her best. Showed her the map, pointing out 2 locations. While he went to one store, he instructed Tiana to buy the ingredients for Marana at the other. The child looked at the map and nodded understand. With their tasks set, he turned to leave, waving a hand as he announced his departure. Tiana watched him go, acknowledging him with a soft sound. The 2 part ways, heading off in separate directions through the busy street. As he walked away, Harris glanced back over his shoulder, a flicker of worry crossing his mind as he wondered if she would truly be all right on her own. Tiana, meanwhile, stood for a moment, clutching the note in her hand. She entered a crowded store, the note still clutched in her hand, and looked around at the various goods and other patrons. Approaching a stall laden with goods, a small voice called out to get the shopkeeper's attention. She arrived at the designated shop, where a kindly woman at the counter welcomed her, noting it was her first visit. The shopkeeper then asked where she had come from. Tiana hesitated for a moment, the word slave echoing silently in her mind. She quickly composed herself, introducing herself as Tiana and explaining that she was under the care of a man named Harris. The shopkeeper's expression shifted to one of recognition, asking if she meant Harris, the adventurer with a bad eye who lived on the hill. Tiana brightly confirmed it was him. The woman's tone softened as she considered Tiana's situation, remarking that adjusting to her new life must be difficult. She gently asked if there was anything the child has slighted or found hard to deal with. An image of Harris, his expression unreadable, flashed through Tiana's mind. Response: she recalled a frightening memory, explaining that she was almost attacked by orcs before she even reached Norn. The shopkeeper gasped in shock, but Tiana quickly reassured her, adding with a smile that her master had fought them off. The woman expressed her immense relief that the child was safe. Her recounting of the event grew more animated and exaggerated. She proudly declared that Harris had challenged the orcs, boasting about showing them how a thief fights. A memory of a flustered Harris denying he ever said such a thing surfaced. But Tiana continued her tale, unabated. She claimed he easily scared, separated and defeated his foes, concluding that her master was simply amazed. Her expression then softened as she recalled other kindnesses. She mentioned that Harris had also given her many delicious things to eat. She added that he had been looking out for her the entire journey from the capital, constantly checking if she was tired or if her legs were hurting. The child finished by sharing that just the day before, he had praised her cooking as well. The shopkeeper listened to it all, a look of quiet understanding on her face. She smiled warmly, encouraging Tiana to make another delicious meal for him that day, an idea the child eagerly accepted. The conversation then turned to the errand itself. The shopkeeper asked how much money Tiana had brought, musing aloud that since Harris was a known drunkard, he would likely prefer stronger seasonings. She opened her small pouch, revealing a few coins, and asked if it would be enough to buy supplies for the next day as well. Seeing the meager amount, the shopkeeper's expression grew concerned, prompting a worried Tiana to ask if she hadn't brought enough. She breathes a sigh of relief as the shopkeeper assures her that the money is more than enough. The woman takes Tiana's hand, remarking on how skinny she is. Tiana realizes with a blush that Harris must want to feed her well. Another woman nearby comments that Tiana will become even more attractive once she has a little more meat on her bones. The shopkeeper agrees, declaring her first goal is to get the child into a healthy shape. From a short distance away, Harris overhears and thanks the shopkeeper, who in turn offers him a discount on fruit to help nourish the girl. His task at the market complete, Harris decides it is time to move on, leaving Tiana and his shopkeeper's care for a moment. He arrives at the front of another establishment where a voice from within recognizes him. Inside, an older man behind a counter greets Harris, informing him that the earring he brought in has been repaired. Just then, Tiana appears at the doorway, basket in hand, and politely asks if this is the shop belonging to a Mr. Box. The shopkeeper, Bach, turns in surprise, impressed that she managed to find her way without getting lost. Harris looks over, a pleased expression on his face as he greets his young charge. Attention fixes on Tiana. He studies her for a moment with a thoughtful smile. He asks for her ear and gently fastens the ornate, repaired earring to her lobe. Tiana stares at her reflection, stunned by the beautiful piece of jewelry. Harris begins to protest, but Tiana quietly expresses her feeling that it is far too much for her. Bach explains with a grin that the earring was mixed in with some second-hand clothes he'd acquired, and that he was having trouble finding a buyer. He suggests that perhaps it was simply waiting for her. Flustered, Tiana looks to Harris, unsure how to respond. She looked up, her cheeks flushed, as a voice confirmed that the new earring looked good on her. Inside the shop, the craftsman, Bach, chided Harris, remarking that it wasn't very nice of him, and that he should be thankful for the chance to get rid of broken items. He noted the earring was almost brand new, and that the girl must have cost less than 10 gold coins. Harris countered that a master's dignity is judged by how he treats his slaves, so there was no harm in making her look presentable. Bach smiled, reminding him that he would need many things from now on, but Harris remained non-committal. The craftsman's lecture continued, warning Harris that if he wasn't paying his debts, he'd be broke in no time. He called him a carefree man who lives alone and sternly advised him not to think he could just drink and wander around as he always does. Visibly flustered, Harris covered his face with his hand as Tiana looked on, calling out to her master in a worried tone. She hesitantly expressed that she couldn't wear something so expensive, but Bach reassured her, explaining that it wasn't much and serve as a sign of her master's worthiness. Just then, a voice from outside called for Harris, urging him to go to the Adventurers Guild. The messenger added that someone named Jonathan had looked pale all morning. As they made their way toward the guild hall, the voice wished them well, certain they would find a good job. Upon entering the building, a young man at the counter, the guild clerk, Jonathan, spotted them immediately. He waved, exclaiming that Harris's timing was perfect. He quickly explained the urgent situation. A rookie party that had entered the dungeon yesterday had not yet returned. With a full day having passed, the guild had decided to dispatch a search party. His words painted a grim picture of the dungeon's entrance, a treacherous set of crumbling stairs. He lamented that he always warns adventurers against using them, but speculated that the rookies might have gotten carried away and made a mistake. Ayana listened, her expression turning to one of horror. The clerk's voice continued, describing the dungeon as a complex maze where it's easy to get lost, filled with monsters far too powerful for novices. He concluded gravely that if they were lost or careless, the result would be total annihilation. The clerk admitted that he had wanted to ask veteran adventurers for help, but they were short-handed, which was when he remembered Harris had returned to Norn the day before. Harris grimly remarked that for rookies, it's like being a moth drawn to a flame. As the two men spoke, a woman with reddish-brown hair approached them, asking for a moment of Harris's time. He was interrupted by Asia, who stood before him, and Tiana with a confident smile. She addressed the group, her voice clear as she referred to the topic at hand. "That search party," she began before placing a hand on her chest and making a formal request. "May I join you?" On the morning of a dangerous job, Harris stands outside a country home. A young woman with brown hair and worried eyes sees him off. He pats her head, telling her not to worry too much before announcing his departure. She quietly wishes him a safe trip. Sometime later, a stone entrance carved into a wooded hillside comes into view. A voice from the party cries out that they have finally arrived at the dungeon. Standing before the entrance, Harris is flanked by two heavily armored companions. One notes that while it's only half a day from the town of Norn, the journey felt quite long. Harris, his expression said, states his desire to finish the job and return home, while the other companion wonders if they'll make it back before Darth addressed the rest of his party, which includes a young man with light hair and a woman with reddish-brown hair getting their attention. As the group gathers, The woman with reddish-brown hair chides them, reminding them that this is not a field trip, and that they must not let their guard down. One of the party members meekly agrees, promising to be careful. She then introduces herself with a stern look, stating her name is Gina, and questioning if the guild had not informed them of this. She continues her reprimand, stressing that they should at least remember the names of those to whom they are entrusting their lives. The larger armored man beside Harris simply responds with a crisp, "Roger that." The armored man, however, responds with an overly cheerful familiarity, calling her Genoma-san. Her face immediately twists into a grimace of profound annoyance. Undeterred, he introduces the rest of the party. The other armored man is Soy, the young man is Ted, and their leader is Harris. As the introductions are made, Harris sighs with weary resignation. He watches as the armored man, Compass, bows slightly, expressing his eagerness to work with them. Asia, beside Harris, can only offer a hesitant agreement. Before they step into the darkness of the dungeon, he calls for a final check, lays out their objective, to search for a missing rookie party, which should be on the first floor. He stresses that they must search every inch of it, because if the rookies went down to the second floor, they would almost certainly be wiped out. Ted asks if the second floor is really that bad. Harris confirms, explaining that giant ogres and trolls roamed that level with even worse monsters on the floor. He continues, noting that the monsters on the fourth floor can wipe out even seasoned veterans. Only powerful holy knights can handle them. The others seem to realize that their new companions have never been that deep, with a sigh. He speculates that some young adventurer probably got carried away, suggesting that perhaps they should turn back after checking the first floor. Hearing this, Asha turns to him, her expression hardening. She calls out to get his attention, and he turns to see what she wants. She reveals that she can use level 4 magic, a statement that surprises him. With newfound determination, she declares that they will search all the way to the second floor. Even if it's too late to save the rookies, she insists they must find their bodies and report back to the guild. Reasoning is simple and resolute, because that's our job. The words echo in the stone corridor. Inside, they find the first signs of a struggle. A goblin lies dead on the floor, its blood pooling on the stone. Someone remarks that the vanguard alone was enough to handle it. Harris observes his new companions as Compass accepts praise, declaring it an honor. Harris acknowledges to himself that they are better than he thought. While inexperienced, they seem to have skills to back it up. His thoughts are interrupted as he spots what lies ahead. A small horde of goblins, an amount that could certainly finish off a novice part. He watches Asha, who confidently remarks that the rest is up to her skills. He agrees, noting that since a person is missing, they cannot let their guard down. As they move through the stone corridor, Compass calls out, having found no clues but spotting a large treasure chest. The armored man approaches the chest, announcing his discovery. He inspects the lock closely, observing that there are no signs of it having been opened. Compass turns to Harris, eagerly declaring that it's his turn to act. Asha, however, looks on with suspicion, wondering if the missing party simply left it there and moved on. Ignoring her doubt, Compass urges them to open it, and Harris quietly accepts the task. He kneels before the chest, discerning that it is neither a monster nor a trap. With steady hands, he inserts a lockpick, and a mechanism begins to click. In a swift motion, the lock gives way with a final click. He lifts the heavy lid, revealing the chest's empty interior, his speed surprising Compass. As they stand back up, Asha comments that his long experience as an adventurer is clearly not just for show, as he seems quite used to such tasks. Harris simply replies that it's how he makes a living. Her words seem to have an effect on him. He turns away slightly, a weary look crossing his face as he reflects that he must hear that sort of thing often. Asia smirks, teasingly calling him rude to a skilled scout before thanking him. Her expression then turns serious as she looks at the empty chest, noting that it stands out too much. Compass agrees, finding it unbelievable that it was left untouched. This leads Compass to wonder if the rookies they are searching for ignored the first floor entirely and went straight downstairs. So he confirms his suspicion, stating that there were no other forks in the path besides the stairs. Hearing this, he makes a decision. He asks the party if they should proceed to the second floor as they had discussed, affirming the plan himself. He looks towards the stone steps leading down into the darkness. He suddenly halts, raising a hand to silence his companions. His sharp gaze is fixed on something down the stone corridor. One of the armored men, Compass, asks what's wrong, and he simply points, indicating the presence ahead. Following his gesture, the party sees the source of his caution. Two enormous white-furred demon wolves blocking the path. They don't appear to have been noticed yet. He murmurs that they can't advance without fighting them, and that it would be a problem if the beasts block their retreat. He concludes that they have no choice but to engage. In response, Compass suggests that Asha's magic should be powerful enough to eliminate a demon wolf in a single shot. Startled, she points to herself in disbelief. Harris agrees with Compass, stating that a floor boss should be simple for her to handle. Resigned, Asha tells them not to expect too much, but a confident smirk quickly replaces her doubt as she grips her staff. Stepping forward, she channels her power and unleashes a torrent of magic, shouting the name of her spell. Icebreak. A massive projectile of jagged ice erupts from her staff. The shard of ice hurtles down the corridor directly toward one of the unsuspecting wolves. Harris watches the display of power, impressed. Her spell finds its mark, striking the demon wolf in a shower of frozen shards. Harris calls out her name, amazed at the impact. The second wolf turns, alerted by the sudden attack. Though wounded, the first wolf is not dead. It lets out a roar of pain and fury, echoed by its uninjured companion. Enraged, the two beasts charge, crashing into the party's frontline defenders. The injured wolf lunges at Compass, who braces his shield to absorb the blow. Seeing the front line engaged, Harris realizes he must intervene and quickly reaches for a flask at his belt. Swiftly pours the flask's oily contents over his sword. Just as he finishes, the second wolf, having bypassed the defenders, lunges directly for him. His blade now, coated in seemingly alight, he stands his ground. Turning to Asha, he declares that he will finish it off. His preparations prove decisive. The battle concludes with one demon wolf lying dead on the stone floor, while its scorched companion pants heavily before finally collapsing. As the immediate threat subsides, Compass expresses his amazement. He tells Harris that it took the three of them just to handle one of the beasts, yet Harris managed to defeat them both. The swordsman, however, dismisses the praise, stating it was no big deal. He continues, explaining that he simply knew how to deal with demon wolves and their affinities. He gives significant credit to Asha, noting that the fact she had already wounded one was a big factor. Acknowledging him as a veteran, Asha seems flustered, meekly stating she was glad she could help. His tone then shifts, becoming serious as he asks her directly why she chose to use Icebreak at that moment. Asha flinches, caught completely off guard by the point of question. Presses on, explaining that for Floor 4 magic, ice attacks are ineffective against the wolves. He points out that she could have simply used a firebolt, a spell with a flame attribute, to much greater effect. She looks away, distressed and unable to answer. Seeing her hesitation, he asks what she means, questioning why she would use her most powerful spell when it was the wrong tool for the job. Finally, she confesses that the only offensive magic she can use is the ice attribute. Harris is stunned into silence by the revelation. Asia quickly apologizes for not telling him sooner and suggests they move on. Her haze to change the subject, she turns and walks directly into Compass's solid plate armor, crying out in pain. The armored knight turns, asking what the matter is this time. She recovers from impact, but then freezes, her hand flying to her mouth in shock at something she sees ahead. Harris notices her horrified expression and asks what's wrong. He and the rest of the party follow her gaze and discover a gruesome scene. Before them lie the remains of other people, their bodies mutilated and left in a terribly deformed state. The scene is a grim tableau of death. Several bodies lie strewn across the ground, their forms still and bloodied. The question of what could have attacked and annihilated an entire rookie party hangs heavy in the air. Arriving to investigate the carnage, Harris, Compass, and Asha take in the horrific sight. Asha covers her mouth, groaning in revulsion. Compass expresses his regret that they didn't make it in time, and Harris grimly agrees, admitting that while he had a bad feeling, the reality is far worse. Attention to the fallen, noting that at least their faces are recognizable enough to determine their gender. The sight becomes too much for Asha, who feels a wave of nausea and says she needs to step away. With a weary sigh, Harris tells her not to wander too far. He then addresses his armor companions, Compass and Soy, instructing them to split up and begin the grim task of matching the bodies with the guild's documents. Compass acknowledges the order, confirming he will take on the task. As Compass reviews the list, he outlines the plan. Once the identities are confirmed, they will retrieve the party's belongings and burn the bodies. Harris, however, looks on with a skeptical expression, quietly disagreeing. He finds it highly unusual for a party to encounter a demon wolf on their very first dungeon exploration, calling it exceptionally bad luck. A closer look at one of the victims reveals a telling inconsistency. The wounds on the body are too few to have been caused by wolves. The evidence suggests the person was eaten only after they were already dead. This discrepancy deepens Harris's suspicion as he wonders what truly transpired. His investigation leads him to a strange mark on the victim's wrist, a set of small dark puncture wounds. The discovery startles him. Then Compass calls out, announcing that he has finished checking his assigned bodies. As he speaks, a large dark snake slithers away from the scene, unnoticed by the group. With their grim work concluded, a large pyre consumes the remains of the fallen adventurers. Compass asks if that is all of them, remarking on the difficulty of the task. Harris confirms that it is. Their duty fulfilled for the moment, Compass turns to Harris and notes that Nason is late. Harris gazes down an empty stone-walled corridor, his expression thoughtful and concerned. Deep within the stone corridors, Asha leans against the wall, her face a mask of regret. She laments her current state, feeling that this is the worst possible outcome, especially after she had so arrogantly lectured the others. A wave of shame washes over her. She sighs, resolving to apologize and figure things out once she gets back. As she contemplates this, a strange dark wisp of smoke materializes from the brick wall behind her, twisting in the air and drawing her puzzled attention. The smoky form solidifies and she lets out a sharp cry of shock. Further down the hall, Harris, Compass, and Soy hear the scream. Harris immediately calls out, asking if she's all right as they begin to run towards the sound. As he and his companions get closer, they all stop short, their faces twisting in disgust. The floor of the corridor has become a writhing carpet of black snakes, slithering and multiplying before their eyes. Harris instantly identifies the creatures as ice snakes, realizing with dawning horror that they are the source of the bite marks on the dead rookies. The revelation comes too late for Soy, who cries out in pain as one of the snakes bites him. Panic erupts as Compass shouts for everyone to get out of there. His armor companions turn to flee. Harris calls out to them. He glances over at Asha, who stands frozen beside him, looking pale and unwell. She lets out a cry of frustration and despair. Reacting instantly, Harris grabs her firmly by the arm, pulling her from her stupor. Yanks her forward, his expression grim as he bellows for everyone to run for the exit. Aisha, startled by the sudden force, is pulled along with him. Their desperate flight carries them through the dark dungeon toward the promise of daylight at the entrance. Moments later, they burst out into the fresh air. Harris bends over, panting heavily to catch his breath, while Asha stands nearby, shaken but finally safe from the immediate danger. He looks back towards the dungeon entrance, cursing the three who returned first. Aisha, her voice trembling slightly, thanks him for the rescue. His attention snaps back to her, and he asks if she was also bitten by the snakes. Her eyes widen in alarm. He turns his head to reveal several bite marks on his neck, explaining that while he was bitten, the poison isn't immediately fatal, so he considers it manageable for now. Despite his attempt at reassurance, Asha suddenly cries out in panic. She exclaims that there is a snake inside her clothes. Harris's expression hardens instantly as he processes her frantic warning. Without a moment's hesitation, he thrusts his hand into her robes. Asha lets out a startled yelp as he pulls a dark, writhing snake from her chest. The creature twists and sinks its fangs deep into his hand, causing him to cry out in a sharp burst of pain. He glares at her, his face contorted from the fresh wound, demanding to know what she is doing. She can only stare back, flustered and speechless. She sighs, looking down at the now dead snake on the ground. She apologizes, explaining that her shocked inaction was just a reflex. He dismisses the apology with a wave of his uninjured hand, clutching his head as the venom's effects begin to spread. His priority is clear. They must find a way to deal with the poison. He asks if she brought any antidote while simultaneously checking his own pouch. She replies that she has none, admitting she had always relied on the priests in their party for healing up until now. Her gaze fills with concern as she asks about his own wounds. He looks at her intently, advising her not to rely on others so much, especially now that their party is short-handed. She stands silently as Harris examines the numerous puncture wounds covering her body, on her hands, her feet, and across her chest. He observes that some of the bites are dangerously close to her heart. He looks away, sweating as the gravity of the situation settles in. He realizes that if he had left her alone, she would have certainly died before ever reaching the town of North. His attention then shifts to the single vial of antidote in his hand. He presents it, explaining that there is an antidote available, but it is only enough for one person. He stares at the vial, contemplating his own fate. He knows that if he were to return a Norn without drinking it, the poison would spread throughout his system, resulting in extremely high treatment costs. Turning back to the wounded woman, he makes an offer. He will give her the antidote, provided she is willing to pay for it. She considers his proposal, her expression hardening. She asks what he would do if she agreed to pay 2 gold coins with an interest of 10% per year. He simply agrees, stating he will buy the antidote from her on those terms. To formalize their agreement, she holds up a glowing crystal. She introduces herself as Gina, the magician, and makes the binding covenant, declaring that she owes a debt of 2 gold coins with 10% annual interest. The pact is sealed under the open sky, with the distant mountains bearing silent witness. With the antidote now used, he holds the empty vial and remarks that it's time for them to go. He gives her final instructions, telling her to report back to the guild while he goes to the temple to take care of his own poisoning. Watched as Gina, her expression earnest amidst a swirl of magical light, formally acknowledged her debt to him, stating that she owed him one. Hearing this, a faint knowing smile touched his lips, his eyes crinkling with satisfaction. He then confirmed that he had received his payment, telling her not to worry about it as they stood at the edge of the woods, ready to part ways. On the morning he finally returned from the dungeon, Harris approached his stone house. As the door latch clicked open, Tiana, who was sitting inside a table, was instantly alerted to his arrival. She immediately brightened, leaping up from her seat with a wide smile. "Master!" she called out, rushing to greet him. As he stepped inside, she welcomed him home with unrestrained cheer. "Look surprised to see her." "You're up this early already?" he asked, noting that she could have stayed in bed, especially since he hadn't returned until after dark. Tiana hesitated, searching for response. She fidgeted with her hands, her gaze cast downward as she tried to articulate her thoughts. Looking up at him with wide, concerned eyes, she explained that she had been at the temple for a while before coming home. Her focus then shifted entirely to his condition as she asked, "Are you injured?" Worry deepened as she pressed the issue, wondering if his injuries were so severe that he had to visit the temple. He quickly dismissed her concern, assuring her that it was nothing serious, just a few scratches. She asked if he was really okay, still seeking reassurance. He confirmed that he was, though his slightly strained expression suggested there might be more to the story. Hearing his confirmation, Tiana's face lit up with a relieved smile. "That's great," she began to say, but her words were cut short by a loud growl from her stomach. The sudden sound left them both momentarily speechless, hanging in the quiet air between them. He is caught off guard when Tiana asks if he has eaten. He hesitates, a bead of sweat on his brow, before admitting that in all the commotion he had forgotten. In response, Tiana's expression softens into a gentle, knowing smile, and she lets out a soft giggle. She then brightens, offering to get him something to eat. The suggestion makes him pause as he realizes they're likely short on ingredients. Explains his plan to her. First, he intends to go to the guild to collect his reward after getting some rest, and then they can buy groceries. Her eyes light up at the prospect, and she eagerly asks if she can come along with it. Sometime later, inside the grand hall of the Adventurers Guild, Tiana's enthusiastic yes can be heard, a delayed but joyful acceptance of his unspoken agreement. The counter, the guild clerk presents a tray holding 8 silver coins, announcing it as the reward. Harris stares at the amount, his expression clouded with confusion. Questions the payment, recalling that the reward was supposed to be only 4 silver coins. The clerk, Jonathan, cheerfully explains that the extra money is a bonus for bringing back everyone's belongings, as well as a portion of the reward from the 3 vanguards. A look of concern crosses Harris's face as he asks if the other party members won't complain. Jonathan simply laughs, reassuring him that he already responded to their complaint that very morning. His cheerful demeanor belies a sharp, internal judgment. He scoffs at the notion that the adventurers who abandoned their rearguard and fled would have the audacity to demand full payment, considering it a complete joke. The guild clerk concludes the matter, urging Harris to accept the reward without hesitation. Beside him, Tiana looks up as Harris quietly agrees. A child then speaks up, revealing that Gina had told her what Harris did. She remarks that despite being poison himself, he looks healthier than she expected. Having heard, he gave his antidote away. Her expression hardens as she scolds him, pointing out that the antidote costs a lot of money. She declares that if it were her, she wouldn't have given it to him even if he had begged. Harris is taken aback, letting out a nervous laugh. He hastily bids farewell to the smiling guild clerk, saying it's time for them to go. Tiana glares from behind him as they exit. The clerk waves them off cheerfully. Once outside the guild hall, he turns to Tiana, who stands silently beside him, and suggests they go shopping. She looks up at him, mentioning she's hungry and can't wait for lunch. She then addresses him as master, and her expression darkens once more. She confronts him directly, reminding him that it said giving away the antidote was no big deal, but she believes that as long as he's safe, that's all that matters. She shouts that it's not fine at all, her face a mixture of anger and distress. The intensity of her reaction makes Harris realize something important. She has no other relatives. He tries to reassure her, promising that next time he will make arrangements so she can live on even without him. Tiana immediately refutes his statement, saying that's not it. Harris looks down, confused, understanding that he has missed her point entirely. Later, back at their lodgings, he sits on the sofa, reflecting on the morning's events. Tiana, still in a bad mood, brings him a bowl of food. He watches her, thinking that despite her foul temper, she had prepared a magnificent meal. A thick, juicy steak sits on a plate, accompanied by fresh bread rolls, a salad, and a bowl of soup. Stare at the meal bewildered. The food looked far too extravagant, and he couldn't understand the reason for it. Across from him, Tiana ate in silence, her expression unreadable. The tense quiet was shattered by a sudden firm knock at the door. Startled, he looked up from his seat and called out tentatively. The knocking grew more insistent, followed by a man's voice calling his name, asking if he was home. Tiana looked up, surprised by the unexpected visitor. She offered to open the door, but he stood up, assuring her it was fine and that he would get himself. You walked to the entrance, the sound of the latch clicking open echoing in the small room. With a sense of caution, he opened the door just enough to peer outside. Standing on his doorstep was a man whose appearance was the complete opposite of a common thief. Clad in fine armor and a fur-lined cloak and accompanied by a massive white beast, the visitor greeted him with a familiar smile, saying it had been a long time. In a tavern, a man named Zek sips from his mug. He and another man, Harris, were once members of the same adventure and party. Harris approaches, greeting his old comrade with a casual wave. He joins Zek at a wooden table, setting down his own drink. Harris remarks that it was quite a mess back there, a sentiment with which Zek, smiling weirdly, agrees. He didn't expect so many people to complain just because he announced his retirement from adventuring. Harris, taking a drink, observes that it's simply a measure of how much they love him. Harris listens with a thoughtful expression as Zek laughs awkwardly, trying to placate two women who are pleading with him to reconsider. Zek suspects their reasons for wanting him to stay are different from the others. Once the women have departed, Zek's demeanor becomes serious again. He asks what Harris plans to do now that he has also quit being an adventurer. Harris smiles, asking him not to laugh before saying his plans depend on what is. He leans in close, cupping a hand to his mouth to whisper his intentions to Zek, who listens intently. Harris reveals his ambition to become a holy knight. When Zek seems taken aback, Harris quickly reminds him of his request not to laugh. Zek clarifies that he wasn't going to, he just thinks it a very big deal. Pleased with the reaction, Harris smiles and repeats the title with satisfaction, thinking to himself how great Holy Knight sounds. A look of sudden realization dawns on Zek's face. He remarks that if Harris is aiming for such a grand dream at his age, then he certainly doesn't have time to be considering other people's feelings. Listened as Harris continued, advising that if one has a dream they believe they can reach, they shouldn't hesitate. Raised his mug, adding with a confident smile that one should live their life without regrets. The matter seemed settled for the moment. Nearby, Tiana was fast asleep on a sofa, her travel pack resting beside her. Later, as they sat together for a meal, Zek casually mentioned that even now that he is a holy knight, he still enjoys spending time with Harris. Tiana, listening in, covered her mouth in astonishment. He processed this stunning revelation, murmuring Zek's name as he finally understood the situation. He then looked at his friend, questioning why a busy holy knight would travel so far just to talk about the past. He smiled warmly, asking if he truly needed a reason to see his best friend. Harris remained silent, his expression unreadable. His smile faded, replaced by a look of serious concern. While cutting food on a plate, he called Harris's name and asked directly if something had happened to the Divine Dragon King. He attempted a weak smile, telling Zek not to look so scary and claiming it was just a guess. His tense posture, however, betrayed his unease. He sighed, then explained his deduction. The only person who can use holy knights as errand boys is the king himself. Deflects the heavy topic, turning his attention to the young girl Tiana. He gently pats her head, reassuring her that the grim nature of his work is nothing for her to worry about. As Zek takes a bite of the food before him, he quietly agrees. The holy knight then changes the subject entirely, asking if the meal was prepared by Tiana. The girl seems surprised by the question, but confirms that she made herself. She misinterprets his brief silence as disapproval, anxiously asking if he dislikes it and offering to immediately bring something else. Zek quickly raises a hand, gesturing for her to stop. He reassures her that the food is excellent. With a contented smile, Zek declares it's so good he would want to eat it every day. A comment which earns a sharp interjection from Harris. Tiana is taken aback by the high praise. Harris warns his friend not to get any ideas about taking Tiana away from him. Zek scoffs at the idea, but Harris points out that with his meager earnings, she wouldn't be able to make much, leaving Tiana looking on in confusion. The implication of Harris's financial situation causes Zek to recoil in shock. He loudly questions if Harris is involved in some sort of illicit dark income, an accusation Harris immediately denies. Imposing himself, Zek takes a drink and explains his concern. He mentions that scouts are often looked down upon and suggests it might be time for Harris to quit. He even admits he was prepared to drag Harris back to the royal capital if he found him still indulging in an alcoholic lifestyle. Harris looks away, a bead of sweat on his temple, remarking that Zek, of course, has not given up on his own duties as a soldier. Tiana watches the tense exchange between the two men. With his arms crossed, he declares that he, at least, has already given up on such concerns for the day. His statement only seems to puzzle Tiana further. Harris bristles, telling Zek not to make it sound like he's the one being taken care of. Zek calmly replies that he's simply relieved Tiana is around, because Harris doesn't take good care of himself. The comment leaves Tiana flustered. She looks up at Harris with wide, serious eyes, telling him she cannot trust him because he always seems to make her worry. Harris is visibly taken aback by her directness, stammers, insisting that her accusation isn't true. But Tiana simply looks down, unconvinced by his denial. Zek leans in, observing that Harris isn't very sensitive in moments like these. He advises Tiana to be direct with him, prompting her to ask what exactly he is teaching her. Harris lets out a weary sigh, remarking to Zek that he has become even more brazen since becoming a holy knight. Zek smiles, retorting that one cannot be a holy knight without a certain amount of brazenness. He adds that serving the palace is difficult, and even if Harris's dreams came true, he would still face considerable hardship. He adds that there are other reasons why he must act this way, leaving Harris to ponder his meaning with a confused expression. Explains that his attitude is precisely calibrated to deal with fools who believe rumors and try to sever ties with him. Harris smirks, understanding now. He remarks that he'd like to see the kind of person who would want to cut ties with a holy knight, then cheekily offers to lend Zek a mirror. He turns his attention back to Tiana, pointing out that this exchange proves his point. It is better to say things directly. Flustered, Tiana puffs her cheeks and tells him to just finish his meal and go home. He cheerfully holds out his bowl and asks for seconds. Harris, watching from the side, mutters that he doesn't plan on staying long anyway. Tiana declares that it's simply common courtesy to enjoy the food and have another serving before announcing she'll be taking payment now. Harris interjects, telling her he'll get the seconds for Zek. At this, a sly, triumphant smile spreads across Tiana's face. She shares a knowing, amused smile with Zek, a silent acknowledgement of the pleasant atmosphere. Outside, a white horse stands ready as a voice trails off, signaling the time for departure has come. Mounted on his horse, Zek bids farewell to Tiana, promising to take payment for the food on his next visit and assuring her he will be back soon. Nearby, Harris lets out a laugh. As he begins to ride away, he turns back one last time, calling out a cheerful request for Tiana to take care of Harris for him. In the wake of his departure, Harris and Tiana stand in silence. Harris seems momentarily perplexed, quietly wondering how he should interpret that parting comment. He turns to Tiana with a wry smile, asking if she has a fondness for that type of man. In response, Tiana simply beams, clasping her hands together with a bright, innocent expression. She declares that Zek is a wonderful person. When Harris looks confused, she clarifies that she thinks so because her masters seem to be having fun. Her innocent reasoning leaves Harris utterly speechless, and she worries if she said something strange. After a moment of stunned silence, he simply places a hand on Tiana's head, reassuring her that it's nothing. In a quiet house nestled near the mountains, the day's activity begins to settle. Inside, Harris stretches his arms above his head, a weary sigh escaping him. Behind him, Tiana quietly closes a door, the soft click echoing in the room. She watches him, a question in her eyes, realizing that with her noisy guest departure, the house has finally fallen silent. He turns, his face etched with exhaustion, and declares his intention to sleep. Tiana responds with a bright smile, agreeing and offering to continue her housework, telling him to just let her know if he needs anything. Her smile fades slightly into concern as she advises him not to push himself too hard. He dismisses her worry, turning the concern back on her by pointing out that she hasn't been sleeping well either. She quickly dismisses his point, flexing her arms in a show of energy. She thanks him for his concern, but insists that she is perfectly fine. Her bravado lasts only a moment before she collapses onto a nearby table, fast asleep. Harris looks on, understanding now just how tired she truly was. Despite her obvious fatigue, she musters a warm, reassuring smile, urging her master to rest well. He agrees, then reaches out and gently pats her on the head, instructing her to wake him by dinner time if he doesn't get up on his own. He turns to leave the room, adding as he goes that it would be a waste to let things get cold, a gentle reminder of their evening meal. She is left alone, standing frozen for a moment as a blush creeps on her cheeks. Then, a wave of determination washes over her. She clenches her fists, readying herself before pressing her hands to her warm face, filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Her newfound motivation spurred her into action. With a splash, she dropped a wooden bucket into the stone-lined well. With grunts of effort, she began hauling the heavy bucket out from the depths of the well. She poured the water into a large tub and began the laundry, humming a quiet tune to herself as she submerged a dark piece of clothing. She scrubbed the fabric against a washboard with focused determination, then twisted the garment with all her might to wring out the excess water. As she picked up the next item, however, her hand stilled. She noticed something amiss. It was her master's underwear. Upon closer inspection, she realized the fabric at the back was worn thin and looked as if it would tear apart very soon. Considered the problem for a moment, her expression thoughtful. She decided she would have to speak with him about it later. With the matter settled in her mind for now, she finished her task, hanging the clean laundry out to dry under the open sky. Meanwhile, inside the house, Hare is finally stirred. He sat up on the edge of his bed, letting out a massive yawn and wondering if he should have slept a little longer. As he opened his bedroom door, Tiana's voice called out to him. He looked down to see her standing there, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. Seeing her hesitation, he asked what was wrong. She begins to speak, stammering an apology to Harris, who looks at her with a questioning expression. The reason for her apology becomes clear as they walk through the market. Tiana laments that they have to go out shopping again, a sentiment echoed by a nearby shopkeeper. Parasize, thinking he should have bought more that morning. Tiana, however, tells him that it's all right as he can finally rest comfortably now. The internally grumbles that it's Zach's fault for eating someone else's food. A memory of Zach happily munching away, commenting on how tasty it all was, flashes through his mind. Tiana then suggests that she should learn how to read, write, and do calculations quickly, doubting she'll be able to accompany him forever. Harris considers her words, realizing that Tiana is a quick learner. He thinks that if she learns the basics, she'll be able to study more at home and won't need to rely on him for shopping in the future. He realizes, however, that teaching her is the most difficult part of the plan. His thoughts are interrupted by a furious shout ordering someone to get out. He turns in surprise to see a familiar figure, Gina, standing outside a doorway. He stares in disbelief, confirming to himself that it is indeed Gina, around the corner. He and Tiana witness the confrontation. An older woman demands to know what guarantees she has that Gina won't be late with the rent again, but Gina insists she already paid. An older man then points at her, yelling that if she can't even earn enough to pay rent, she should just quit being an adventure and tell her nephew the same. Argument ends with Gina's belongings thrown onto the street. She kneels amidst the mess, cursing the family for being so small and worthless. As she looks up, her face is a mask of pure fury, startling both Harris and Tiana, who are still watching. She stammered, trying to find her words amidst the scattered remnants of her life on the pavement. Harris, standing nearby with Tiana, could only look on in shock, letting out a cry of disbelief. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she fully registered his presence. Sweat beaded on her brow as she struggled to explain the humiliating scene. Her thoughts a jumbled mess. In a sudden shift, she pushed herself to her feet, hoisting a large sack over her shoulder. A bright, forced smile spread across her face as she greeted him loudly, declaring how glad she was that he was doing well. Caught off guard by her cheerful facade, Harris could only stammer a weak agreement. A wooden mug slams down onto a table with a resounding crack, its owner roaring in frustration that the situation is unbelievable. The outburst echoes through the tavern, with a bartender remarks to a pair of patrons that she feels bad about someone being late on their rent. One of the patrons grunts in agreement. Harris vents his own frustrations to Tiana. He explains that while he did pay his rent after covering his living expenses, he had already informed his landlord he would be late and received his agreement. Tiana listens with wide eyes, is mirrored by Asha, who grips her own mug tightly, her face flushed as she curses that damn landlord. Outburst leaves Harris and Tiana momentarily speechless. Asha sits beside a packed travel chest and a large rucksack, clearly having been evicted. As her companions stare, Tiana's gaze falls upon the luggage. The child, concerned, speaks up earnestly, telling Asha that there's no need to throw out her luggage as she thinks it's too much to discard. Asha, surprised by the sentiment, asks if she really thinks so, and then asks for the child's name. She introduces herself simply. Tiana. Asha repeats the name softly to herself. A sudden wave of affection washes over Asha. She playfully pinches Tiana's cheeks, calling her a good girl and declaring she wants her as her own child. Her mood darkens again as she laments her lack of money, and on top of that, having no place to sleep for the night. The weight of her words settles over the table, and a heavy silence descends upon the three of them. Asha slumps forward, utterly dejected. Harris finally breaks it, turning to Asha with a direct question. He asks why the landlord kicked her out in the first place, reasoning that she must have some idea what triggered such a sudden change in his attitude. Asha avoids his gaze, merely sighing in reluctant agreement. As she considered her predicament, the events leading to it became clear. Harris recalled the party from the previous day where they had encountered a trio of vanguards, Zoe, Ted, and a man named Kamba. Asia then revealed the crucial connection. The landlord was Zoe's uncle. Harris, his expression darkening, understood immediately. Asia confirmed his suspicion, explaining that after she reported the vanguard's behavior to the guild, Zoe must have complained to his uncle that he didn't receive a good reward, leading to her eviction. She took a long drink from her mug, confirming that was the gist of it. With a grimace, she offered her condolences, stating it was no wonder the landlord now held a grudge against her. He processed this, then pointed out that the vanguards have been humiliated by both of them. Asia was surprised to be included in his assessment. Harris elaborated that it was the trio's own fault for running away and leaving them behind, yet they were the ones seen poisoned and bubbling on the street. He admitted the situation had escalated too far, but confessed he still felt satisfied drinking to it. Her expression softened into a warm smile. Lifting her mug, she proposed a toast to him, calling him a perfect companion. Harris, looking weary, managed a small smile and clinked his mug against her with a quiet cheers. As their mugs met, Tiana eagerly joined in, raising her own small cup and adding her own cheerful toast. Her participation prompted a question for Asha about what she would do now. Asha considered this for a moment, then suggested she might move to a different town. Harris mused that it would be a shame for her to quit her side job in this town, but conceded that adventurers can always find work elsewhere. He then revealed his own side job, teaching reading, writing, and some magic. Despite this, he explained, he only earns about 12 silver coins each month. Asia listened with a knowing, almost smug look on her face. Her composure broke as she suddenly demanded to know why. With such a high income, he had no money. She then launched into an explanation of her own finances, exclaiming that it costs a great deal to be a mage, as scrolls become rarer and more expensive the farther one gets from the capital. He touched his chin, contemplating her words. "But it's a shame," he murmured. Tiana, listening intently, understood. This was why Asha was leaving Norn. She explains that she was just looking for someone to teach her how to read and write, and thought Asha would be the perfect person for the job. Asha, her expression downcast, replies that she would have been happy to do it if she was still staying in town, but she no longer has a place to live. Harris listens, noting how much Tiana seems to care for the mage. Hearing this, she turns and gently tugs on Harris's sleeve to get his attention, tentatively calling out to him. She then proposes an idea. What if they rented their spare room to Aisha? The suggestion catches Aisha by surprise, who questions if Tiana means her own room. Harris mulls it over, but Aisha voices her hesitation, admitting she doesn't want to live in a small space. He concedes that her point is valid. He clarifies that they live in a house and have an empty room upstairs. While the kitchen and dining area would be shared, the room itself would be hers. As Asha processes the offer, he confirms it's genuine. Tiana then chimes in with a bright smile, suggesting that Asha can pay her rent by teaching her to read and write. The proposal leaves Asha speechless. A light blush does her cheeks as she takes in the generous terms. After a moment, she accepts, formally asking if she may stay with them. With her acceptance, Harris declares the matter settled. Beside him, Tiana beams, her eyes sparkling with delight. The little girl turns to Asha, excitedly proclaiming that from now on, she will be Gina-sensei. Asia laughs, finding the title a bit embarrassing. She suggests that since they're going to be living together, Tiana can just use her first name, playfully asking if she doesn't want them to get along. Tiana becomes flustered by the forwardness, but quickly agrees to the arrangement. Taking this a step further, Tiana then asks if she can call her one Ichon or big sister. The familiar term startles Aisha and draws a sharp look from Harris. Tiana immediately retracts the question in a panic, apologizing profusely. Aisha, however, seems unbothered, telling the girl she doesn't mind. She turned to the young girl and gently asked why she wanted to call her Onekan. Harris listened, his expression thoughtful. Biana's face flushed as she clasped her hands together, confessing that she had always wanted an older sister figure. Aisha listened with a soft smile, understanding dawning on her. Her heart warmed by the simple wish. She told Tiana that she could call her whatever she liked. Seizing the opportunity, Harris then asked if, in exchange, he could call her by her first name. Asia readily agreed. Overjoyed, Tiana covered her mouth and whispered. Gina won each on with delight. Harris, however, cut through the cheerful atmosphere, stating that he needed to ruin the mood for a moment. He declared his intention to add this to their arrangement before it was forgotten, leaving Asia puzzled. Confusion turned to shock as Harris's demeanor hardened. He sternly clarified that their previous conversation and the matter of her paying off her debt were entirely separate issues. He warned her not to feign surprise and insisted she would pay him back. Flustered, she shouted back that she was well aware of her obligation. She reminded him that since they would be living together, it would be impossible for her to flee from the death. Diana then addressed her new one Ichan, playfully calling her inconsiderate. The girl's expression then shifted to a bright, welcoming smile as she said she looked forward to their time together. The tension broke, and both Harris and Asha smiled at the child's words. Later, the three of them sat together at a table laden with food. Asha gently patted Tiana's head, warmly agreeing that she too was looking forward to their new life together. Under a sky blanketed with stars, a voice declares their journeys, and as they gaze upon a range of snow-dusty mountains, at the door of a house nestled in the woods, Harris, carrying a large crate, asks Tiana to open the door. Gina watches them, her expression hesitant as she asks if this is truly his house. He confirms that it is. The house itself is a large, well-maintained structure. As Tiana and Harris approach the entrance, Gina is left speechless, stunned by its unexpected grandeur. Quickly morphs into comical disbelief. She had imagined a shabby, run-down shack, that kind of place adventurers in the countryside wouldn't normally live. The reality of the fine house makes her wonder who Harris truly is. Once inside, Tiana cheerfully announces she will go make some tea. Harris then turns to Gina, guiding her towards her room. He preemptively apologizes for it being empty, but she seems pleasantly surprised, remarking that it's a very nice room. He opens the door to reveal a vast, unfurnished space with ornate windows. She notes that there's really nothing there. He agrees, explaining that until recently he lived alone, and that she's lucky he didn't decide to use it for storage. She places her suitcase on the wooden floor, acknowledging that a room of this size is no different from her previous one. However, she considers being able to stay here just for tutoring to be an incredible deal, though she still seems to harbor doubts about the house. Her gaze drifts to the window, through which she spots a stone well in the yard. This sight only deepens her contemplation. The house feels far too large for one person to live in alone. Even if he bought it simply because he wanted to, it seems excessive. Her mind racing, she turns to face him, her expression a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Hey, Harris," she begins, her voice trailing off as she prepares to voice her theory. "Maybe you're—" He was met with an intense gaze as Gina finally voiced her suspicion, asking if his family was very wealthy. She pressed on, demanding to know what he was talking about. She elaborated on her reasoning, pointing out that it's difficult for an adventurer from the countryside to earn enough to buy a house, and that the place didn't feel like a dream house he had saved up for. He remained silent for a moment, his expression unreadable before confirming her theory. That was precisely why he explained he had gotten the house from his parents, seemed reluctant to discuss the matter further, asking if he really had to answer that question. Gina, however, smiled disarmingly, admitting she was just curious and told him he didn't have to. She then cheerfully changed the subject, declaring that he was the landlord who would be taking care of her from now on. Harris seemed taken aback by her sudden shift in demeanor. Their exchange was interrupted as Tiana peeked around the doorframe, announcing with a bright smile that the tea was ready. The child's arrival broke the last of attention. Gina placed a hand on Tiana's shoulder, suggesting they enjoy the tea before it gets cold. She then turned back, calling out to Harris as he stood in the doorway. He paused, turning to ask what was wrong. He watched as she smiled warmly, telling him that she really liked the house and thanking him for carrying her luggage. As the door slid shut, Harris simply replied that she was welcome. Now settled inside, she took a sip of the warm tea, letting out a sigh of contentment. The drink was good. She sat at the table, taking a quiet sip of tea, and remarked how long it had been since someone had made her a cup at home. Harris, seated opposite her, noted that such feelings were common for those who live alone for extended periods. Attention then shifted to the young girl. Gina asked if Tiana was responsible for all the housework, but the child quickly denied it. Noticing the well-made apron Tiana wore, Gina complimented it, asking if she had made it herself, which left the girl flustered and at loss for words. The girl explained that she was simply using an apron that was already in the house, admitting she's a klutz and finds them difficult to wear. Gina, however, looked on with a puzzled expression, silently wondering if it was some new fashion for women's aprons. Sensing the girl's hesitation, she asked if something was wrong, but Tiana insisted it was nothing. Gina correctly deduced the issue, stating that Tiana must not be very good at sewing. The child quietly affirmed her guess. In response, Gina offered to teach her how to sew. The proposal surprised Tiana, but Gina assured her it was no trouble. She had one condition. In exchange, Tiana would have to tell her everything about the house. The young girl's face lit up with excitement at the arrangement. Diana then turned to Harris, addressing him as master. He smiled warmly, telling her it was a good thing. He then considered the new arrangement, suggesting they would need many supplies and should go shopping for them the next day. He then turned his attention to the present, telling Gina she should get some rest. He apologized, offering her the couch. An idea Tiana quickly seconded. Harris, however, corrected them both, stating firmly that he would be the one sleeping on the couch. Declaration prompted Gina to point out the obvious flaw in his plan, with only one bed in the house. If he took the couch, she would have nowhere to sleep. A bead of sweat formed on Harris's brow as he insisted. He would be fine even without a proper bed. As he grew flustered, Tiana offered a simple solution. Both he and Gina should sleep in bed. The suggestion caught both adults completely off guard. Recovering, Gina turned to Tiana, stating that she needed to confirm something first. She looked the young girl in the eye and asked a direct question. Where did Tiana usually sleep? Before the child could answer, Gina reconfirmed the fact that there was only one bed in the entire house, a point Tiana. Diana cheerfully announces that she will be sleeping in bed together with her master. The declaration stuns Gina with a grimace, demands the child stop looking at her that way, quickly backpedals, muttering that she has no right to tell Tiana what to do with her slaves, prompting an indignant shout from Harris. Tiana simply looks on, puzzled by the outburst. The child then tries to explain the situation, stating that it's customary for men and women who are not in a relationship to avoid sleeping in the same bed. She earnestly insists that there is nothing untoward happening between her and Harris. Harris listens with a tired expression, questioning her reasoning, seeing an opportunity. Gina cheerfully volunteers to sleep on the couch, adding that if Tiana wants it, she'll take the floor so there's no need for concern. Tiana offers a hesitant word of thanks. As evening settles, the house stands quietly amidst the trees. Inside, the main room is still the hearth, cold and dark. On the couch, Gina sleeps soundly, having claimed her spot for the night. Elsewhere in the house, behind a closed door, a sliver of light cuts through the darkness. A lingering thought surfaces. Was this arrangement truly all right? In the bedroom, Harris sits on the edge of the bed and turns to Tiana, who stands silently nearby. He asks her what is on her mind. She voices her concern for Gina Nietzsche, wondering if the woman can rest comfortably on the sofa. Harris reassures her, explaining that as an adventurer, Gina is capable of sleeping anywhere. Harris pulls back the covers of the bed, deciding it's time to rest. He remarks that Tiana must be tired as well, and that, more importantly, they should both get some sleep. Diana, sitting on the bed, agrees with a quiet yes. As she carefully removes the new ornate earrings he bought for her, she acknowledges that it has indeed been a long day. She then crawls under the covers, settling in next to Harris, who is already lying on his side with his back to her. Soon after, both of them are sound asleep, lying side by side in the bed. The night passes, and the first light of morning streams through the lattice window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Staring from her sleep, Tiana's eyes flutter open. She looks around for a moment before quietly calling out to her master. Voice finds him already awake. She looks up at him and brings up what Gina had said earlier, that men and women don't usually sleep in the same bed. He listens to her concern, his expression calm. He explains that it doesn't matter to him as he's used to sleeping on the floor or the ground and can rest pretty much anywhere. He tells her that's why she doesn't need to think too much about it. His thoughts then turn inward, trailing off as he considers the specific act of sleeping next to Tiana. She looks at him intently and finishes his unspoken thought, stating that sleeping with him is special. The word catches Harris completely off guard, and he quietly asks if he is special to her. The question seems to cause Tiana a flicker of distress. Asha concludes her explanation, stating that's all there is to it. Lying nearby, Tiana quietly affirms that Asha is right. She leans back on the couch, arms crossed, and eyes closed with a satisfied smile, concluding that there's nothing to worry about. Later, in their room, Harris looks down at Tiana, who is already tucked in a bed. He tells her it's time to go to sleep, and she agrees. As he lies down beside her, Tiana turns and clutches a handful of his shirt, her small fist tight against his chest. She looks up at him with wide, earnest eyes and quietly wishes her master a good night. He closes his eyes with a gentle smile, returning the sentiment, and wishing Tiana a good night as well. Soon after, Tiana is fast asleep, a peaceful and content smile on her face as she continues to hold on to his clothing. Outside, the full moon shines brightly in a star-filled sky, casting its light over the quiet, snow-capped mountains as the night deepens. Inside, Tiana sits with a large, ornate book, hesitantly reading aloud about a prince who has decided to embark on a journey. From nearby, Asha encourages her to keep going. Just then, the sound of a door opening echoes through the room, passes, and Tiana looks up from her book, her attention caught by a question about what she is reading. Asia explains to Harris that it is a children's story, noting that its simplicity makes it excellent teaching material. Tiana asks if she finds the story interesting. With a bright smile, she confirms that the prince is just about to set off on his adventure. She beams, exclaiming that it is indeed very interesting. Pleased by her enthusiasm, Harris gently pats her head, remarking on how skilled she has become at reading. Asha affirms his praise. She adds that Tiana is also getting quite good at writing. Tiana, however, looks away with a slight blush, modestly insisting her skill is still only minor. Harris expresses his surprise at how quickly she learns, telling her she has been working very hard. Aisha adds that Tiana's math has improved so much that she can now go shopping alone without issue, a comment that seems to spark a memory for Harris. She continues, informing him that the lady from their usual shop was praising him. Harris looks flustered, asking with a hint of disbelief if she means the woman they refer to as Auntie. A young woman with distinctive earrings looks up, addressing the unseen Harris. She seems flustered as she confirms that she heard he had returned the extra change she gave him by mistake. She continues to explain, gesturing toward a small pile of coins on a table, that when she got home and counted the money, the total didn't match her calculations, no matter how many times she checked. Harris, now visible, confirms that the shopkeeper and Auntie had called him about the matter. Asha, sitting nearby, smiles and remarks to the young woman that this incident simply shows Harris's meticulous personality in all things. She then presents the large, round, reddish fruit, explaining that the shopkeeper wants him to give it to Tiana. The young woman looks on in confusion, asking what it is. Eyes widen in shock as she identifies it as a palm fruit. Asia calmly confirms this, adding that it's highly nutritious and good for the skin, but also quite expensive. The young woman becomes agitated, worrying that the fruit is worth more than the change, and insisting there's no need to hold back. Asia, however, reassures her with a gentle smile, explaining that the fruit is simply a token of the shopkeeper's gratitude intended for Tiana. Deciding to matter, Harris tells her that something like this should be accepted gratefully and formally hands the palm fruit to her. Accepts the fruit with a beaming smile, promising to eat it with care. Asha advises her to eat it before it spoils, and Harris adds that she should tell the shopkeeper her thanks the next time they meet. The young woman enthusiastically agrees. With the matter settled, Harris announces he's going for a nap, thanking them for their hard work before turning to leave. The young woman quietly acknowledges his departure. The moment he is gone, Asia confirms his absence. The young woman immediately turns and rushes toward a small bed in the corner of the room where Tiana is resting. She presents the finished garment to the other woman, assuring her that it should be fine now. The woman, Asia, smiles brightly, holding the newly made item and asking if they should continue. From a nearby doorway, Harris watches them with a puzzled expression, wondering what they're doing. Scene shifts to an earlier moment, focusing on the delicate work of a needle-stitching fabric as Asha calls out to Tiana. She looks up and responds. Asia then explains that something has been on her mind for a long time. She asks Tiana directly why she decided to make underwear for Harris. The blunt question catches Tiana off guard. Asia immediately becomes flustered by her own forwardness, asking if the matter is a serious one. Tiana, equally flustered, stammers as she tries to formulate an answer. She clarifies that it's not a big deal, but rather a persistent annoyance she notices whenever she does the laundry. Asha lets out a sigh of understanding as Tiana reveals the simple truth. Their master's underwear is completely in tatters. She confirms this with an embarrassed expression, adding that Harris himself doesn't seem to care much about the state of his undergarments. Asia correctly predicts Harris's likely response that he would insist it's still usable and wear it until it falls apart. Tiana quietly agrees, both sharing a moment of understanding about the man's stubborn fragility. She looks up, her expression earnest and bright, declaring her intention to make a new one and give it to him as soon as she can. Asia watches her with the knowing smile, leaning on the table as she suggests they should finish the new garment before the old one falls apart completely. The thought makes Tiana giggle, covering her mouth as she continues her needlework. Elsewhere, Harris lies on his bed, lost in thought and completely unaware of the gift being prepared for him. He will certainly be surprised. In a room bathed in a gentle glow of morning sunlight, the young woman Tiana begins to stir from her sleep, her fingers brushing against her cheek. Nearby, Harris watches her, his expression unreadable. Her bare legs are tangled in the sheets of the bed they have apparently shared. Interview reveals them lying apart on the same large bed. Suddenly, Harris jolts awake, a look of groggy confusion crossing his face. She turns his head to see Tiana sleeping soundly, a peaceful smile on her lips as she murmurs in her sleep. She shifts slightly, her hand coming to rest on her stomach. He quietly gets out of bed and pulls the blanket over her. He reflects on how different this is, finding it hard to believe she was curled up in fear not so long ago. Eyes flutter open, and upon seeing him, she greets him sleepily, calling him master. He wishes her a good morning in return. A moment later, realization dawns, and she sits bold, upright, apologizing profusely. Outdressed, she looks at him with a hint of confusion. He explains that he has work to do first thing in the morning, and will get breakfast ready, telling her she can go back to sleep if she wishes. He continues, reassuring her not to worry and admitting he simply forgot to tell her the night before. He gently tells her to sleep well. Tiana looks down, touched, and thanks him sincerely. Ready to depart. He turns at the door and says he's off. Tiana beams, a bright and genuine smile on her face as she wishes her master a good day. He then steps out into the bustling morning streets of the city, joining the crowds of people beginning their day. Outside a large warehouse, a man expresses his profound gratitude to Harris. He explains that if the goods hadn't been delivered by noon, the deal would have been cancelled. Harris, looking slightly weary, advises him that for such an important warehouse, he needs to be more careful with the keys. The man readily agrees. The man continues, laughing with relief, stating his disbelief that a scout as skilled as Harris could be found in this town. Harris in the background appears somewhat taken aback by the praise. He modestly insists that he isn't really that skilled, but the man waves off the humility. He tells Harris not to be so modest, explaining that the warehouse locks are not designed to be opened so easily. The man grows more contemplative, acknowledging that while there are other skilled scouts, many have bad reputations. He notes that Harris, however, is different in that regard. Elsewhere in town, Tiana is chatting cheerfully with two other women. One of them relays what she heard from vendors of the street stalls, that a certain slave girl is often heard bragging about her master's incredible skill. Tiana beams with pride. In another part of the city, Asha speaks with a small boy. She mentions that her own son is a student of Tiana's and that she is indebted to her for it. She didn't ask the boy if he's living with her. Back at the warehouse, Harris admits he doesn't particularly like the idea of being seen as a lady killer. The man clarifies that while some people are like that, when they're serious about their work, you can't help but trust them. Because of his trust, he has added a bonus to Harris's reward. He claps Harris on the arm, declaring that he'll be counting on the skilled scout for now on. Harris looks thoughtful for a moment, beginning to voice a reservation. Expression suddenly shifts to one of stern warning. The man holds up a hand and tells Harris that he won't forgive him if he tries to flirt with his wife. He shouts that he absolutely will not do that. With the business and the warning concluded, Harris turns and waves goodbye as he walks away. From the doorway of the warehouse, the man waves back. He sighed, walking along a path. He had been wondering why he was getting so many requests by name lately, and now he understood it was because of him. His thoughts turned to Tiana, and he considered that perhaps he should buy her something next time. He mused on Tiana's simple pillow and pajamas, realizing he would need to buy her some winter clothes soon. He also considered that Gina likely didn't have the money for a bed, and he wouldn't mind paying for a good sofa if one became available. Growing list of expenses made him anxious. He remembered that his leather armor needed repairs, and it was time to replace his knife as well. It seemed all of this would completely empty his wallet. Meanwhile, Gina and Tiana were having a similar discussion. Gina noted that with the three of them living together, their expenses were becoming more detailed, and she worried that her current earnings wouldn't be enough to support them all eventually. Continuing his walk, Harris acknowledged that his own everyday clothes and underwear were also damaged. Despite this, he decided to put off replacing them for now, even resolving to hold off on buying any alcohol. As he approached their home, a cheerful voice called out, "Master!" The door opened to reveal Tiana, her face lit up with a wide, proud smile as she held up a new pair of men's underwear for him to see. He took the garment, completely stunned. Tiana happily explained that it was his new underwear, but Harris could only ask what this was all about so suddenly. Confusion turned to concern. He asked Tiana why she had bought his underwear, suggesting it would have been better to buy her own daily necessities instead. Faced with his question, Tiana became flustered and speechless. So before Tiana can answer, Asia blurts out the reason with a fluster expression. shouting that it's because Harris is wearing tattered underwear. She explains further to Harris, recounting how she had been teaching Tiana to sew. When she asked the girl what she wanted to make first, Tiana's immediate answer was master's underwear. Asha notes that Tiana barely has any clothes of her own and was excited to make them, but she only ever seems to care about her master. Having laid out the facts, she turns to Harris with a knowing smile, pointedly asking if he has something to say. He looks away, a bead of sweat on his temple, and reluctantly agrees that she's right, eating her prompt. He turns to Tiana and offers his thanks, telling her the garment is very well made. Her face flushes with a deep blush, her eyes wide with surprised happiness. Seeing her reaction, he softens his expression and thanks her again, this time with more sincerity. The awkwardness dissolves into a moment of warmth. Asia places a comforting hand on Tiana's shoulder as the girl beams with pure joy, and Harris looks on with a fond, gentle smile. He looks down at the gift in his hands, a new resolve forming within him. He decides he'll get a bigger job, whatever it takes to protect that innocent, joyful smile. At the Adventures Guild, Harris reviewed a job posting confirming the details with the clerk. It was a transport mission to the capital, with a reward of 10 gold coins. He asked who the request was from. The clerk, Jonathan, cheerfully informed him that it was a named request specifically for him with a reward of 8 silver coins. Jonathan elaborated that the request came directly from the guildmaster, the old lady from Samard. He added that she was very pleased to hear about Harris's recent good reputation, a fact that made Harris immediately suspicious of her motives. Continued relaying the guildmaster's exact, condescending words. "Is that drunkard guy finally ready to rehabilitate himself?" Jonathan added with a carefree smile that with Harris's current standing, they wouldn't have to worry about compensation in case of an accident. Final, cheerful good luck. Jonathan declared that everything would be fine as long as he didn't fail. The implication struck Harris with sudden clarity. Tiana was his collateral. The weight of this unstated threat settled upon him. Back at home with his travel pack ready by the door, he explained to Asha and Tiana that he had to leave for 2 weeks. Tiana quietly processed the news. Asia, however, found the departure sudden and questioned if a mission was truly urgent. Harris could only admit that he didn't know, explained that it was a direct request from the guildmaster, reasoning that it would be far more dangerous to refuse and provoke her. Asha conceded the point, though her concern remained. Harris then helped to speak with Tiana directly. He asked if she could take care of the house, promising to return as soon as possible. Tiana gave a firm yes. Asha assured him they would manage, and Tiana beamed, promising the house would be sparkling clean for his return. As he turned to go, she called out one last time, "Oh no, master." She stood quietly beside Asha, who wore a knowing smile. As Harris began to speak, both of them listened intently. Asia then leaned in close to Harris, whispering a suggestion into his ear based on something from Tiana's favorite book. He reacted with confusion, but she gave a confident thumbs up, pleased with her idea. He let out a resigned sigh before calling out Tiana's name. She looked up at him, her expression filled with curiosity, but he then leaned down and gently kissed her on the forehead. Her eyes widened in surprise as a deep blush spread across her face. With his travel pack now secured on his back, he gave her a final reassuring pat on the head. "Farewell's complete," he announced his departure. Tiana, still overwhelmed, covered her blushing face while Asia watched with a satisfied smirk. As he turned to go, she suddenly found her voice, calling out for her master and wishing him a good day. Her words reached him at the doorway. He glanced back over his shoulder with a fond smile, telling her to be careful. Having left the town behind, he set out on a path that wound through the wilderness toward distant mountains. He considered his journey, realizing that traveling alone would allow him to take a shortcut to the capital. Considered the terms of his mission. The reward for delivering the package to the Malice Trading Company was fixed, regardless of whether he arrived early or just within the designated time. The top priority was simply to complete the task. Recalling his previous encounters, he decided it was safest to stick to the highways. He wanted to avoid any unplanned battles to ensure his own safety and prevent any loss of time. As he walked, another thought occurred to him. There were some other things he'd like to take care of while he was on the road. His train of thought was broken by a faint, sharp sound nearby. Paused, his gaze sweeping over the path that stretched out before him, disappearing into the dense woods. Unaware that he was being watched, he continued his journey down the mountain trail. From a distance, another man with dark, tied-back hair observed his progress with a neutral expression. The observer's brow furrowed slightly, a hint of concern crossing his features as he watched Harris's retreating form. A sudden, sharp realization struck the man. He cursed quietly, understanding the grave danger Harris was walking into. The situation was bad. Meanwhile, back at their lodgings, the quiet was shattered by a loud crash. Aisha, sitting alone, was startled as a wooden bucket of water tipped over and slammed onto the floor. Noise brought Tiana to the doorway. Asha called out, asking if she was all right. Tiana admitted with a slight flush that she had just tipped the bucket over and offered to help if Asha needed anything, which Asha politely declined with thanks. She gave a small, embarrassed smile before closing the door and sliding the lock into place. She stumbles, knocking over a wooden bucket. Water splashes across the floorboards, the sound echoing in the quiet room. Now wearing an apron and holding a cleaning cloth, she sighs in mild frustration, thinking it would be a simple task to wipe clean. But then she pauses, a flicker of confusion on her face. Her gaze drifts to a small desk, specifically to one of its drawers. A memory surfaces of her master, Harris, pointing and giving a stern warning. "Do not open the drawer in the bedroom." This brings back another memory of her standing at the doorway, informing him that his portable rations were ready. Come to think of it, something about that moment now seems significant. In her recollection, he had turned to acknowledge her, confirming her name, Tiana, and saying he was coming. The memory fades, leaving her with a lingering sense of unease as she smooths the bedsheets. She feels as though he was hiding something back then and wonders if he took it with him to the capital. A quiet uncertainty settles over her as she contemplates the mystery. Standing alone in this room, she clasps her hands together, her concern growing as she whispers his title, Master. Far away, as if in response to her unspoken worry, Harris's eyes snap open with a start. He finds himself lying on his back in a sun-dappled clearing, having apparently dozed off during his journey. He pushes himself into a sitting position, a curse escaping his lips as the grogginess clears. It was sleep magic. His eyes scan the empty mountain path, his mind racing. Was this the work of common bandits or something more targeted, someone trying to interfere with his mission? Suddenly, sharp realization cuts through his confusion. His hand flies to the pouch at his belt, fingers fumbling with a clasp. A look of dread washes over his face as he finds it empty. The gold coins, they were gone. Harris awakens under the shade of a tree, a dull ache in his head. He curses his misfortune, realizing he'd been caught in an unexpected blunder during an important mission, likely by some form of sleep magic. A quick check confirms his fears. They took everything except for the gold coins. He glances down at his clenched fist, a wave of relief washing over him, as he confirms that his valuables are, in fact, safe. With his most important assets secured, he decides on his next move. First, he will find an inn in the next town. Having found lodging, he sits on the edge of the bed, preparing to finally assess his situation. Inside the simple room, he stomps his foot firmly on the wooden floor. He then pulls off his boot, the discomfort of his hidden cash now apparent, before removing his cowl to get more comfortable. Turning the boot upside down, a single gold coin falls out with a clink, followed by others as he begins to count them one by one. He finishes his count with a satisfied smirk, confirming his entire stash of 10 gold coins is present. He muses that his attackers were too naive, failing to realize what he was truly protecting. Reasons that if it had been common bandits, they would have stolen his other gear as well. Besides, there are those who hold grudges against him, giving him no reason to live in the first place. Protecting only the gold was a calculated risk. Considered the recent attack, a faint smile on his lips. They hadn't taken his luggage or his life. He concluded they were naive fools, driven solely by the desire to see his mission fail. Elsewhere, Asia recounted the event with a sly grin, telling someone that Harris had just humiliated their attacker. She identified the man as Zoe, one of the so-called Airhead Vanguard trio who had fled a previous battle. More than that, he was the landlord's nephew who had kicked her out. In the end, Harris let out a sigh. He conceded that for a novice. The boy had done pretty well, but the thought of someone trying to steal from a thief was laughable. They were 100 years too early for that. Later, at a counter, he handed over his money to a clerk. The man confirmed the receipt of 10 gold coins and provided Harris with a receipt for the transaction. With his business concluded, he decided it was time to get a meal. As he walked, a familiar voice called out his name. The voice belonged to Elia, who greeted him with a warm smile, exclaiming that it had been a while. He smiled back, remarking that she hadn't changed at all. She asked if he was in town for work. He confirmed that he was explaining that he needed to have a chat with the trading company about donations. Her questions continued as she inquired if he was alone. Harris affirmed that it was a solo transport mission. Elia grew thoughtful at this, then apologized before beginning to ask him for something. She leaned forward slightly, her expression serious, and asked if his cargo was gold coins. Harris's eyes widened in surprise. She had guessed correctly. In a quiet plaza, water cascades down a tiered stone fountain, the sound echoing off the surrounding brickwork. Explains that she's heard rumors of elaborate counterfeit gold circulating, which is why traders are being more meticulous than usual. With a knowing smile, she adds that this must be why he was entrusted with transporting gold coins under such sensitive conditions. Harris admits that he overheard the information, downplays his knowledge, stating that due to the nature of his job, he tends to hear about unsavory characters. Elia laughs, calling him modest, but confirms that what he said aligns with the rumors she has heard. Her expression turns serious as she specifies that apparently, the fake money has already flowed into the city of Norn. Harris confirms that this matches what he has heard. The cautions are not to place too much trust in his information, dismissing it as just a rumor. Visibly startled, Elia presses him, asking if it is actually true. She seems flustered by his directness, conceding that he is right before trying to recall details about Norn. He calmly clarifies that Norn is the city where he lives. Elaborates, recalling that the rumors started about a week before he left the city, which means the counterfeit currency could already be in circulation. He then asks if she knows anyone in the Knight's Order. Elia confirms she does, explaining that she was asked to gather information on the fake gold through her adventurer contacts, and promises to have the Knights investigate as soon as possible. In response to her promise, he smiles warmly and asks her to pass on his regards. He remarks that it is difficult to live peacefully with counterfeit coins circulating, a fact he states is absolutely true. He then reveals with a grin that the fake money in question is actually his. A memory surfaces of an older man rewarding him with 10 fake gold coins for a previous request. Because possessing counterfeit currency is a felony, he couldn't spend or exchange them, forcing him to hide the coins away and take on his current mission. He concludes with a wry expression, admitting he was hoping to get rid of the coins during a mission, and is actually glad that some idiot stole them. His hand rests near the pouch of his belt, the same one targeted in the recent robbery. He agrees it's a solid idea. Aaliyah, her finger to her chin in thought, speculates that if counterfeit money is involved, the perpetrators must either be desperate for funds or have extensive underhanded dealings. He then poses a question. What is the right answer? He explains that currency is fundamentally a form of trust. If a poor person were to use gold coins, they would immediately be suspected of stealing them. Furthermore, using counterfeit currency for illicit transactions could easily escalate into a life-or-death struggle. He continues, pointing a finger to emphasize his point, suggesting that the culprits would likely appear to be serious, upstanding individuals at first glance. Ilya quietly processes this revelation. The explanation conjures an image of the wealthy and powerful, those with status and property. It is precisely these individuals who seem to have no need for fake money, who can most easily pass it into circulation. He elaborates that creating counterfeit currency is not without cost. Getting caught using it in a common transaction is not only a significant loss, but also a very serious crime. Ilya's expression grows concerned as she listens. To make it worthwhile, one must account for the cost of materials, labor, and transportation. To safely recover these expenses and circulate the fakes, the currency must be imbued with a perceived value. It must be backed by trust. Based on this logic, he suggests that anyone investigating the source should probably start by looking into more formal, respected professions. Ilya acknowledges that this is, of course, just his personal opinion. She beams, clasping her hands together, admitting that she's learning a great deal. As someone who knows little of the world's darker side, she confesses she would never have considered such things. For some reason, she finds Harris easy to talk to and feels an urge to rely on him. He seems taken aback by her candidness. With a bright, deliberate smile, she agrees with her own assessment, and the atmosphere between them softens. She explains that since she has been taking on more responsibilities, caring for others like Asha and Tiana, she no longer has time to dwell on matters alone. Harris watches her, a slightly bewildered expression on his face. Thoughts turning to the child, Ilya asks how Tiana has been. Harris replies that she is full of life, doing much better than he is. Ilya smiles, pleased to hear the news. Apologized, feeling that they had ended up talking for a long time. She was sure Tiana was doing well, because she lived with a kind-hearted Harris. He quickly dismissed her apology, reassuring her that it was no problem, and that it had been a while since they had last seen each other. She thanked him for his time as they prepared to part ways. He then flashed a charming smile, noting that since it was about time for a meal, perhaps they could have dinner together. The suggestion caught Ilya by surprise. Her expression shifted to one of gentle resolve. She politely declined, stating her desire to get the valuable information they had discussed to the knights as soon as possible. With a cheerful wave, she bid him farewell, leaving him stunned. Watching her walk away, he stood alone by a fountain, deciding he would just eat at home. A somber thought echoed in the quiet square. You can feel an empty stomach, but not an empty heart. A young man prostrates himself on the ground, his forehead touching the dirt as he shouts, "Aniki, it's as you say," addresses. Harris looks on with a bewildered expression, wondering who this person is that has appeared so suddenly. Young man lifts his head, looking incredulous. He asks if Harris truly doesn't remember him, then points to himself and announces his name as Kamba. The name sparks a memory for Harris, who recalls him as the big airhead member of the Vanguard trio. Realizing who it is, Harris feels a wave of annoyance, thinking what a pain this is. Kamba, still bowing, acknowledges that Harris must think him useless from their time in the dungeon, and admits he has no reply to that. He decides to move on, telling Kamba he's glad to see him well and to be a good boy. But as Harris turns to leave, Kamba lunges forward, grabbing his bag and pleading for him to wait, insisting he has something important to tell him. Harris grits his teeth in frustration, having been so close to town. He becomes urgent as he specifies that he needs to talk about gold coins and Zoe, causing Harris to stop dead in his tracks. Hearing those names, Harris's expression hardens with suspicion. He silently questions how Kamba could know about that. Kamba, for his part, realizes that a careless word could make the situation troublesome. He attempts to bluff, coldly stating that he has no idea what Kamba is talking about. The flat denial leaves Kamba utterly shocked. Stunned but undeterred, Combe explains what he knows. He insists that he overheard Zoe himself plotting to attack Harris and steal his gold coins. He continues his story, admitting he didn't know what to do. He had searched for Harris to warn him, but was told he had already left. Sometime after, he saw Zoe in a suspiciously good mood. As Kamba finishes his tale, his head rests dejectedly on Harris's shoulder. Harris himself says nothing, his gaze fixed on a document in his hands, his face a mask of grim concentration. He looks over a quest receipt for 10 gold coins, confirming the mission was perfectly completed. Turning to a young man beside him, Harris states that he has successfully finished his task, adding that he's glad the young man was worried about it. The young man's face breaks into a wide, relieved grin. He exclaims that if nothing happened, then everything is fine. He continues, beaming, expressing his certainty that the man named Zoe must have given up on his plan. Harris, however, looks unconvinced, thinking to himself that it all seems too easy. Still, seeing the young man's satisfaction, he decides to let the matter rest. Harris then changes the subject, pointing at the young man and asking why he's been calling him Big Brother. He states plainly that he doesn't recall having a little brother like him. The young man is stunned, his expression turning to one of shock and disbelief. He cries out, questioning how Harris could say such a thing when he admires him so deeply. He explains that the mission with Harris made him painfully aware of his own immaturity, and that he wants to become a full-fledged adventurer just like his Aniki. With that, he announces that from this day forward, he will be Harris's little brother, and sprints off into the distance, leaving Harris momentarily confused. The young man stops and turns back, his hands on his hips, asking with great intensity if it is truly all right for him to call himself Harris's little brother. Harris, already walking away with his back to the young man, waves a dismissive hand over his shoulder and tells him to do whatever he wants. The young man's face lights up with pure joy, a silent exclamation of surprise and happiness on his face. As Harris continues on his path, he declares aloud that he too will do whatever he wants. Behind him, the ecstatic young man follows, ready to begin his self-appointed role. He arrived back to a warm reception. Tiana greeted him with an enthusiastic welcome back, while Asha, sitting at a table, observed that his return was a little earlier than planned. She asked with concern if he was all right during his journey. Patting her gently on the head, he confirmed that while there had been a bit of trouble, the mission was complete. His mention of trouble prompted Asha to ask for details. He explained that Zoe had tried to interfere and Kamba had made a fuss about it. Asha reacted with dismay, realizing that Zoe still held a grudge against him. He seemed unconcerned, musing that Zoe would eventually calm down. Asha, however, felt they should be more cautious, warning that prideful men like Zoe only become more insidious and persistent, ignoring their own blunders to blame everyone else. However, looked up at him with unwavering trust, declaring that if Harris said so, there must be a good reason for it. Her declaration was interrupted by Asha, who prompted Harris with a knowing smile, asking if he had something he wanted to say to Tiana, who looked on in confusion. Asha placed a hand on her forehead in exasperation, but his Harris looked from her to Tiana. A sudden realization struck him. She finally noticed her new, shorter hairstyle and asked if she had cut her hair. Tiana beamed, happily confirming that she had. As Asha smiled in satisfaction, he offered a slightly flustered compliment, telling Tiana that it looked good on her. She happily explained that Aisha had cut it for her. Aisha elaborated, patting Tiana's head, that her bangs had been getting in her eyes and looked itchy, which wasn't good for her eyesight. Her face lit up with the joyful yes in response to the compliment. Harris then turned to Asha, thanking her as well. Tiana, meanwhile, silently congratulated herself, basking in the moment. Asha, in turn, thanked Harris for looking after Tiana. He deflected the praise, mentioning that Asha had helped with a meal, a point Tiana eagerly confirmed, referring to her as one Ishan. He then asked if any food was still available. Asha smiled, saying it was her pleasure and that she was simply doing her part as a housemaid. His question was punctuated by a loud growl from his stomach. With a bead of sweat on his brow, he sheepishly admitted that he hadn't eaten lunch yet. Hearing this, Tiana's face broke into a wide, enthusiastic smile. She announced that she would prepare his meal right away, promising him it would be delicious and something to look forward to. True to her word, she began serving the meal while Asha approached the seated Harris with a bottle and glasses. She offered him a drink to go with his food, a small reward after his work. He looked on, slightly flustered, thinking to himself that there was no escaping their overwhelming hospitality. Inside, Harris holds up a piece of cloth, showing it to Gina. He explains that the name embroidered on it wasn't there before. She looks at it, then asks him what's wrong. As they speak, Tiana appears in the doorway, asking if something is the matter. Gina explains to a confused Harris that Tiana was the one who sewed it while he was out. Diana looks at him with a questioning gaze. Harris, flustered, quickly dismisses it as not a big deal. He can't help but notice the intense pressure of Gina's stare in moments like this. Full attention to Tiana, holding the cloth and pointing to the name. He asked her directly if she was the one who did it. She beams with pride, confirming that she sewed her master's name on it, because she can now write names. Harris seems to understand. Gina playfully asks why he didn't just write his own name, but he mutters that it has too many characters. Diana blushes, admitting shyly that she wanted to learn how to write her master's name first. Her bright smile returns as she proudly announces that she also put his name on all of his underwear and undershirts. Harris is taken aback, the reason for the mysterious embroidery finally dawning on it. He asks in disbelief if she really did it to everything. Tiana cheerfully confirms it, adding that she'll sew his name on the clothes he's currently wearing after they're washed. Mortified, Harris can only manage a strained thank you, realizing he's now an old man with named pants, as Gina stifles her laughter. However, seems to misinterpret his reaction, simply stating that she's glad he's good at sewing now. She carefully pulls the final stitch, her face a mask of concentration. A moment later, a brilliant, triumphant smile spreads across her face as she exclaims her success. As Gina offers to prepare the morning meal, Tiana gasps, suddenly remembering her duty. She stammers that she'd forgotten about breakfast. Her flustered reaction brings a warm, knowing smile to both Harris's and Gina's faces. Later, as the dishes are being washed, Gina remarks that a great deal has transpired during Harris's absence. He prompts her for an example. In response, Tiana eagerly announces that she has finished reading a book, the one Harris had seen her with for a while. She proudly explains that through her reading, she discovered that the edible leaves described in the text were actually growing in their backyard. She clarifies for Harris that the vegetable garden was located south of the well beside the shed. Gina expresses her disbelief, questioning if those weren't just weeds and asking Harris if he was teasing her. Tiana continues, explaining that their neighbor, an old lady named Adi, had taught her a great deal about tending to the garden. Gina smiles, glad that Tiana was finally able to introduce herself properly. Conversation then shifts as a plate of assorted sweets is presented. A question is raised about what might be amiss with them. After taking a bite, Harris remarks on their quality, noting that the ingredients and craftsmanship seemed far too refined for them to be simply handmade. He wonders aloud if they were expensive, causing Tiana to grow hesitantly. She turns to Gina, asking if she managed to get it. With a calm expression, Gina confirms that they did. Conversation turns to Tiana, who mentions with a gentle smile that the guildmaster seems to have taken a liking to her. Harris reacts with baffled disbelief, confusion mounting. He turns to Gina, demanding to know why she would have encountered the guildmaster. She explains it was because she hadn't yet submitted her relocation notice to the guild. She continues, clarifying that she brought Tiana along to submit the paperwork, viewing it as an opportunity for the girls' social learning. And that's when they ran into each other. But the chance meeting led to an extended conversation. Gina recounts with a smile that they chatted over tea for more than an hour, a thought which makes Harris's stomach churn with anxiety. Tiana then asks if the guildmaster was a kind person. Gina readily agrees, stating that there is no doubt she is a good person. Expression, however, shifts to one of knowing amusement as she trails off with a cryptic comment, leaving Tiana looking on in confusion. Regina then reveals the source of the woman's powerful presence. She is a former great adventurer, which explains her amazing aura. As Tiana listens intently, Harris remains pensive, admitting to himself that he can't fathom the guildmaster's intentions. He remarks aloud that one would have to be exceptionally skilled to hold the position of number 2 in the entire town. This revelation leaves Tiana completely stunned. He looks over at the wide-eyed girl and asks if she simply thought the guildmaster was just a nice old lady. Tiana, sweating slightly, confirms that she had no idea the woman was so incredible. Gina smiles warmly, remarking that it's reassuring to have someone so powerful on their side. Tiana, however, seems less certain, quietly wondering if the guildmaster's fondness for her is merely a coincidence. Harris leans back with a slight smile, his hand behind his head. He reflects on the well-wishes he received, thinking he should probably thank her the next time they meet. He finds it amusing that she treats his affairs as someone else's problem. His thoughts are interrupted by Tiana, who cheerfully asks if he is going to the guild today. Standing up from the table, he confirms that he is on his way to collect his reward. Give a small wave as he heads for the door, bidding them farewell. In unison, Tiana and Gina wish him a good day. His boots make a soft sound as he steps onto the grassy path, beginning his journey. As he walks, his mind drifts to a recent conversation with Ilya. She had told him about informing someone named Norn, and assured him that she would handle things. She explained that the Night Order would soon begin an investigation into the counterfeit money, which would make it much harder to move funds in or out. The memory is unsettling, while the existence of counterfeit money is a known fact of life. He finds himself wondering what Zoe will do with the fake currency he stole from him. He continues his walk through the town, deciding it would be best to live a careful life for a while. His path leads him to the Adventurers Guild. As he enters, 2 men at the counter greet him warmly, welcoming him back. Inside, he meets with Jonathan, the guild clerk. The clerk presents a tray of coins as payment, thanking Harris for completing the mission without incident and adding that he was a great help. The clerk then makes a serious proposal. He states that in the absence of the main party, he wants Harris to fill in for them from now on. Dismissing any notion that the request is ridiculous, he continues to press his case, urging the adventurer to reconsider. Harris, however, looks weary, gesturing dismissively as he questions what could possibly be expected from a single middle-aged scout. The scout's face contorts in disbelief. He demands to know what the clerk is talking about, specifically questioning the idea of forming a fixed party with someone named Kamba. In response, he calmly clarifies that an application was submitted the previous day. On that application, Harris was named as the party's leader. The news renders Harris speechless. A dark aura of frustration begins to emanate from him as he realizes that Kamba simply did whatever he wanted. His anger quickly turns to self-approach as he remembers his own words. He was the one who told Kamba to do as he pleased. He laments his carelessness, but still thinks that this doesn't justify suddenly applying to form a party. Looks up, defeated, and quietly confirms it wasn't unauthorized. Seeing his state, Jonathan offers to withdraw the application if it was submitted without his consent. After a moment of consideration, Harris relents, acknowledging that it can't be helped now, and that there's a limit to what he can accomplish on his own. Jonathan smiles, pleased with the outcome. He then explains the guild's reasoning, noting that they are currently understaffed. He elaborates that many people lack the actual battle experience needed to form even temporary parties, a point with which Harris readily agrees. With the context established, he extends his hand again, stating that there is something he would like to ask of him. Harris listens intently. He then makes his proposal with 3 simple words: Rookie Training Corps. He extended his hand in a formal offer, posing a simple yet profound question to Harris. Why don't you try it? The proposition hung in the air, suggesting the potential birth of a new role for the adventurer, Harris-sensei. At the Adventurers Guild, Harris stands before the counter with a clerk. Jonathan presents him with an unexpected job to lead a new recruit training unit. He mulls over the offer, his thoughts turning to the guildmaster. Jonathan smiles and confirms that the guildmaster himself has stressed the urgency of training new members. The clerk explains that the guild wants to avoid a repeat of the last rookie party's total annihilation. Harris, rubbing the back of his neck, finds it unusual for a scout to be chosen as a leader, a role typically held by vanguards, for the real intention behind the offer. Jonathan's expression brightens as he earnestly insists that he believes Harris possesses the qualities of a leader. He then concedes with a helpless gesture that, more practically, there are no other active veterans who seem to have any free time. Harris's expression shows he is unconvinced. Scout Grimes is remarking that this is a tough way to make a living. He internally laments having no better options, yet also feels a flicker of gratitude for being willing to take on even the most modest assignments. The clerk continues his pitch, noting that there are few good missions one can do alone. He raises a finger, beginning to suggest a party composition involving Compa. Reveals the proposed lineup would be ideal. Gina the mage, Compass the warrior, and Harris himself as the scout, and lays out the party structure, with Harris as the veteran overseeing mid-career adventurers and rookies. He argues that with this team, they could clear the first layer of a dungeon, especially since Harris's skills would handle any traps. John cuts straight to the point, assuming they dive into a dungeon with that party. He asks, what would his share of the earnings be? The direct question catches Jonathan completely off guard. Guild clerk Jonathan continues his pitch with a confident smile. He explains that the rookies aren't a position to be educated, while Harris himself can dive deeper in a dungeon on his own. He brings a finger to his lips conspiratorially, suggesting that the stable, continuous income is a charming prospect. Holding up 3 fingers, he clarifies that the income from treasure chest would be for Harris and the other 2 members of his party. Paris remains skeptical, gesturing towards the idea of a chest overflowing with riches. He concedes that while such a haul is fine for them, he questions whether the rookies would agree to being excluded from it. Jonathan's smile doesn't falter as he calmly states that he will convince them. This confident assertion does little to reassure Harris, who turns away and crosses his arms, his expression deeply unconvinced. As Jonathan cheerfully says, okay, Harris lets out a low, frustrated groan, clearly stressed by the proposition. Jonathan's cheerful demeanor is cut short. However, when Harris suddenly turns back to him with an exclamation of disbelief, asking if he is being serious, Harris raises a finger, laying down his terms. He will accept, but just once for starters. Jonathan, looking downcast, asks about his dissatisfied expression, but Harris cuts him off, stating he doesn't care about the clerk's reasoning. His tone grows serious as he explains the gravity of the situation. When it comes to education, he says one has to take responsibility for the lives and deaths of others. It is not the same as a simple freelance mission. He continues his sobering assessment, reminding Jonathan that it's a job with a bad reputation. If something were to happen to the rookies, his own credibility as a scout would be destroyed. The immense weight of the choice is clear. A scale balances a skull against a small pile of coins. Harris asks if the work and risk are truly worth the reward, adding that if he fails, he might not even be able to live in this town anymore. Jonathan listens, his expression now grim. He listened with a troubled expression as Harris laid out his final condition. The adventurer would undertake the mission once, and only then would he make a final decision, adding firmly that he would not accept any objections. Relieved, he agreed, confirming he understood the terms. He promised to speak with the guildmaster and inform Harris once the details were finalized, immediately setting the agreement to paper with a quill. Offered a sincere thanks as Harris turned to leave. The adventurer accepted the papers with a dismissive wave, thinking to himself that he had known this would be the outcome. He watched Harris depart, a confident smile gracing his features as he reviewed the documents. In his mind, there was no doubt. No one was more qualified for this task. Sometime later, Harris arrived back at his residence, announcing his return. He stepped into the quiet living room, finding it empty and realizing the others were not inside. His thoughts turned to the garden, but before he could investigate, a piercing scream erupted from outside. Startled, he immediately moved toward the source of the commotion, demanding to know what was wrong. The cause of the alarm was a large snake, its head darting forward with a flick of its tongue. Asha, her face a mask of panic, cried out for Tiana. In response to her cry, Tiana appeared, calmly holding the reptile in her hands. Asia demanded to know what she was holding, to which Tiana replied with a cheerful smile that it was a snake, a fact she found quite obvious. He stepped out in his garden just in time to see Tiana proudly presenting the snake, calling out to him as her master. He could only stare completely baffled by the scene and question what she was doing, her smile never wavering. She turned and offered him a warm welcome home. Still taking it back, he could only manage a simple reply confirming his return. He stands in the doorway, met with Asha's frantic outburst. She points a trembling finger, exclaiming that he's just as bad with snakes as he's always been. Beside him, the young woman Tiana looks up and innocently asks if that's true, then excitedly explains that she was planning to use the snake as an ingredient for stew, insisting that it's delicious and questioning why they would need it. Asha, still agitated, urges Harris to intervene, but he remains silent, a thoughtful expression on his face. Frustration mounts. Asia grits her teeth, conceding that it is indeed a large snake, but she shouts that its size is completely beside the point. Finally, breaking his silence, Harris calmly tells Tiana that they have other food, so there's no need to eat a snake they found nearby. This unexpected response leaves Asia utterly bewildered. Turns to Asia, explaining with a serious expression that their financial situation is more dire than she realizes. Her face falls to the news. He continues, pointing out that if they had more money, they could afford luxuries like more alcohol, and she would already have a proper bed in her room. He then asks if she disagrees, reasoning that for an adventurer, their body is their most important asset. To maintain it, he argues, there is nothing better than having plenty to eat, no matter the source, be it insects, frogs, or snakes. Tiana attempts to comfort the distraught mage, telling her it's all right. Overwhelmed by his pragmatic, if unappetizing logic, Asha begins to cry, conceding that he is right. Young woman, undeterred, holds up a piece of cooked snake on a fork. She cheerfully explains that the meat is light and delicious once it's been cut up and cooked properly. She then turns to Asha, holding up the remains of the snake with a brilliant smile, and declares that it's also very energizing. Asha can only stare, her expression a mixture of fear and disbelief. The sight is too much for Asia. Shaking, she holds up her hands and pleads for Tiana to keep it away from her. Harris steps in, offering to take the snake from the girl who readily agrees. The snake's head rests on a wooden board, its preparation for the meal now underway. As Harris skins the creature, he remarks that he's surprised Yana can eat snakes. From nearby, she confirms that she can't. He looks at her, puzzled by her casual acceptance, while stirring a large pot. Tiana explains simply that they were poor and she ate everything she could find. She recounts how she would trap birds, catch snakes and frogs, and gather wildflowers from around the house, all to ensure her brothers and sisters had enough to eat. Explains with a smile that she found it fun to cook everything deliciously and make the table look extravagant. Harris listens, his expression unreadable. She beams, declaring how happy she is to be able to make a meal for her master like this. Watching her genuine joy, Harris quietly acknowledges her sentiment as she gives an enthusiastic yes. With her work complete, she presents a cutting board piled high, with neatly sliced pieces of snake meat, announcing that she is done. Harris thanks her profusely. Meanwhile, Asha cautiously peeks over the back of sofa, asking if the preparation is finished. She notes with surprise that there's much more food than she expected. Back at the stove, Tiana tends to the simmering pot. Harris watches for a moment before telling her that the first portion on the plate is for her. She turns, surprised by the gesture, but before she can respond, Harris urgently calls her name, warning her to look behind her. Her expression shifts to one of startled confusion. She turned to see the source of his alarm, a large, skittering cockroach that had emerged from a crack in the wall. The sight of it rendered her completely still. Harris, confused by her frozen posture, began to ask what was wrong, while Asha looked on with concern. Asia, however, was far from still. Covering her face with her hands, she lamented what a terrible day it had been, crying out that she couldn't take any more. She pleaded with Tiana to kill the creature, while Harris expressed his disbelief that Tiana could handle snakes, but not this. Tiana, panicking, explained that snakes are delicious, so it's different. Her terror peaked as the cockroach began to move towards them, as she screamed that they were all going to die. With a decisive step, Harris crushed the insect under his boot. He announced he would throw it away, earning a sigh of relief from both Aisha and Tiana. Their relief turned to horror, however, when he bent down and picked up the crushed remains with his bare fingers. He turned to dispose of it, but Asha, recoiling in disgust, begged him not to bring it near her. She insisted she wasn't acting like a child. Harris calmly agreed, saying he would throw it away near the entrance where the laundry was. As he walked away, Tiana, with a look of earnest concern, reminded her master to please wash his hands before he ate. He acknowledged her request with a simple, "I know." He reached the front door, muttering to himself about the commotion. As he unlatched it and swung it open, he was startled by what he found on the other side. Standing on the doorstep was an older man with a prominent scar over his eye, flanked by two men in formal uniforms. Harris could only manage a sound of surprise. The scarred man began to apologize for the sudden visit, but his words caught in his throat as he noticed the crushed insect Harris was holding. His face contorted in utter disgust. A visitor quickly covered his nose and mouth with a handkerchief, clarifying that since it was the front door, he didn't mind the intrusion. From inside, Asha and Tiana appeared out, wondering who their unexpected guest could be. He appeared flustered, glancing back at his two uniformed companions and confirming their affiliation with the Knight's Order. The older man seemed to be gathering himself, a bead of sweat on his temple. After a moment's hesitation, he cleared his throat to get the man's attention. confirming his identity as Harris, where Harris simply asked what the visitor wanted. The older man's gaze hardened as he revealed the reason for his visit. He needed to talk to Harris about the fake gold. With his purpose stated, the visitor formally requested Harris's presence at the town hall. A wave of anxiety washed over Harris. The very situation he had feared was now happening, in a sunlit field. Harris looks back over his shoulder as a young man in a formal uniform addresses him as master. The memory shifts to a quiet moment in a forest. He kneels before a young woman who stands nervously, her hands clasped. He gently asks her what is wrong. Aggression firms with resolve as she tells him she will be waiting for his return. To seal this promise, she leans forward and places a gentle kiss on his forehead. Transitions to the present on a busy street in a bustling town. Here, Harris walks alongside his blonde companion, drawing the worried gazes of a local shopkeeper and a small boy. His walk is abruptly halted when a hand seizes his arm. Annoyed, he turns, telling them to keep moving and demanding an explanation. It is his companion who has stopped him. The shopkeeper steps forward asking what Harris has done. The companion explains that Harris is under suspicion for using forged gold coins and asks if she has any information. The shopkeeper, taken aback, can only question the idea of fake coins, admitting she knows nothing. He scoffs at the accusation, stating there's no way such a thing could happen. His companion's gaze hardens as he asks if Harris is attempting to cover for someone. His dismissive response only fuels the suspicion, with his companion shouting that such an attitude is what makes him look guilty. The shopkeeper watches the tense exchange, murmuring in disbelief. Suddenly, the shopkeeper interjects with a defense. She reasons that if Harris truly had a wealth of gold coins, he'd be spending all on alcohol. However, she points out, he hasn't bought any liquor from her in days. Harris is struck silent by her unexpected logic. The investigation moves to a formal government building into a spacious chamber furnished with a long table and several high-backed chairs. In an adjacent room, Harris and his companion are met by a uniformed man who instructs them to wait. He takes a seat, letting out a weary sigh as he crosses his legs. Moments later, the door to the main chamber creaks open. He wonders how they found him so quickly after the information about the fake old surface. He considers two main possibilities. The first is simple prejudice. As a scout, he belongs to a profession often associated with thievery, making him a convenient suspect for those with a biased perspective. He recalls that there are only 2 scouts in his town, himself included. The other has a notoriously poor reputation and is currently absent, which might be why the suspicion has fallen squarely on him. Meanwhile, his companion speculates on the second, more likely possibility to the guard, that the man named Soy testified he received the counterfeit coin from Harris. He believes this must be the true reason for the summons. Saris considers the grim reality that he would have been helpless if they had planted fake gold in his house. He realizes, however, that it was a blessing in disguise that he was apprehended before they had a chance to search his home. His contemplation is cut short as the doors swing open. A woman in a knight commander's uniform, followed by a stern-faced man and his companions, enters the room. Harris is then escorted into the main chamber and seated alone before them. He identifies the man at the head of the table as the consul, Gerald Lancer, flanked by several knights. A woman fixes her gaze on him, her expression unyielding. She introduces herself as Gabriel Mark, the leader of the Eagle Knights, and directly addresses him, confirming he is Harris, the adventurer. Decides to dispense with formalities and get straight to the point. Across the table, Harris calmly agrees. She immediately levels the accusation, stating that he used 10 fake gold coins. His response is a simple, direct denial. No. His casual demeanor remains as he claims to have no memory of such an act. She warns him not to lie, threatening him with the gallows, but he retorts that he would rather not face such a face. For frustration mounting, she changes tactics, urging him to confess in exchange for a possible reduction in his sentence. He scoffs at the offer, crossing his arms with a confident smirk. He questions how he could possibly confess to a crime he didn't commit and tells her to cease her sloppy investigation. His insolence breaks her composure. She slams her hands on the table and shouts, enraged. He continues, warning that framing an innocent man would damage the prestige of the order and its lord. Unfazed. He smirks as she reveals they have testimony against him. When he asks whose it is, she refuses to say, claiming she doesn't need to. He coolly points out that she likely means she can't say. Anger flares once more. From across the room, she demands to know why he maintains such an attitude, questioning if he truly understands the gravity of his position. He remains silent, looking away. He turns back to her, his tone shifting. He asks what the 10 gold coins were supposedly used for, according to the testimony, asserting his right to know the details of the accusation. His direct question catches her off guard. After a moment of hesitation, she provides the answer. They were used as a deposit to purchase a rental property. Having extracted the crucial detail, Harris's expression shifts to one of understanding. He murmurs to himself that he now sees what this is all about, before turning his attention back to his interrogator. She then abruptly changes the subject, casually mentioning that dinner for the evening will be a stew made from snakes caught in her backyard. The bizarre statement leaves Gabriel Mark completely bewildered, able to muster only a confused sound in response. He presses on with a strange line of questioning, posing a hypothetical. If a man who subsists on snakes he catches around his home suddenly acquired 10 gold coins, would he really use it to buy a house? As he speaks, a new figure arrives, an older woman with a knowing smile. Observing the scene, she remarks that her presence seems unnecessary, much to the surprise of the other knights. The knights recognize the newcomer with a mix of awe and shock. One of them identifies her as the guildmaster, while another realizes that their strongest ally has just arrived on the scene. The guildmaster herself stands with an air of quiet authority, her expression unreadable. Inside an office, the guildmaster arrives, addressing the waiting party. She apologizes, hoping she did not keep them waiting for too long as she enters the room where Harris's fate is to be discussed. She sits down, explaining to a concerned Harris that she was conducting a bit of research. He questions her, and in response, she presents a single, gleaming coin. Investigation, she elaborates, revealed that the witnesses who accused Harris were in possession of fake gold coins, prompting her to verify their claims. She proposes they begin by examining the house where Harris currently resides, a suggestion that startles him as he thinks of Zoe and his allies. Before he can respond, the knight leader, Gabriel Mark, interjects with a stern expression. She states firmly that the house was given to Harris by its previous owner, whom she knows well and is not a rental. Harris quietly confirms that what she said is true. Guildmaster continues presenting her findings, holding up documents for all to see. She points out that the contract submitted by the witness, supposedly signed by Harris, has completely different handwriting. Furthermore, she notes that the rental property mentioned in the accusation is far too expensive for Harris to have afforded. She then hands a folder containing this evidence to the knight leader, asking for her confirmation. The knight leader accepts the documents, agreeing to review them. Harris looks on, taken aback by the thoroughness of the defense being mounted for him. The guildmaster assures him that this is enough to start, and adds that she has a theory as to why the witnesses try to frame him in the first place. The knight leader provides the motive. She explains that one of the witnesses had previously abandoned a quest, which Harris then accepted and completed. This act, she suggests, fostered a personal resentment, driving the witness to tarnish Harris's reputation as an adventurer. The guildmaster adds another layer to the conspiracy. She brings up Gina, who was evicted for harassment by a man who happens to be the uncle of the first witness. Their plan to frame Harris went awry, she concludes, when Harris offered Gina a place to live in his house. With all the evidence presented and the motives exposed, the guildmaster raises her hand to silence the room. For all the reasons she has laid out, she declares with finality that, in her opinion, Harris is clean. Within the knight's order, an auditor named Carlyle presents his report to Commander Mark. He confirms that Harris possesses a valuable slave, but notes the source of his funds is suspicious. Carlyle laments their lack of clear evidence, and a commander listens intently. He concludes that, for now, there is no reason to detain Harris. Commander Mark clenches her jaw in frustration, but concedes the point, acknowledging that nothing can be done at this stage. Then addresses Harris directly, informing him that while the matter is dropped for today, the investigation is not over. She warns him that he has not been fully cleared of all charges. A statement Harris meets with a dismissive laugh. Turning to depart, the commander expresses her hope that the truth will be uncovered, her face a mask of irritation at his nonchalance. The formal meeting room now sits empty, the tense confrontation having concluded. Sometime later, Harris walks alongside the guildmaster, getting her attention. He thanks her for her help with the situation. The guildmaster dismisses his gratitude, stating she also felt the knight's approach was overly aggressive. Her expression then turns serious, as she indicates there is a more important matter to address. She invites him to a room for what she calls a little reflection session. A bead of sweat forms on Harris's brow, as he nervously agrees. Now seated opposite one another in a well-appointed office, a steaming cup of tea between them, the guildmaster gets straight to the point. She asks Harris if he has an explanation for everything that has transpired. He feigns ignorance with a nervous smile, asking what she could possibly mean. The guildmaster simply lets out a weary sigh in response. His composure breaks as he panics internally, wondering if she could have possibly discovered the details of a previous, sensitive request he had undertaken. Across from him, the guildmaster's knowing smile suggests she knows far more than she is letting on. He internally insisted there was no way the guild could know about his recent activities, as he hadn't gone through them. But across from him, the guildmaster held her teacup and asked with a piercing gaze, "Do you think I don't know that?" The guildmaster laid out the facts with cold precision. She knew about his involvement in a zeonite mining operation, a commission he accepted knowing the material was for counterfeit gold coins. She specified that he took the job without guild sanction, and that the fake coins he received his payment had caused a significant mess. The revelation struck Harris, who broke into a nervous sweat, realizing she knew everything. She continued her interrogation, asking if he was aware of the trouble he was causing people. Harris, still sweating, could only wonder in disbelief at the reach of her information network. He stood with his hands on his hips, defeated, and admitted that he was. The guildmaster simply stated that as long as he understood what he was doing, it was fine, questioned her nonchalance, pointing out that his actions were criminal. The guildmaster calmly explained that she saw no merit in letting him go, declaring him a valuable, ready-to-use resource. She set her teacup down on its saucer. Harris remained silent, reflecting that he wouldn't have cared about the consequences back when he was just a drunken, delinquent adventurer. She correctly guessed his motivation, asking if it was because of Tiana, and noting the girl would be sad to see him go. Harris confirmed it. The guildmaster observed that both Zoe and the knights have been sloppy, which worked out well, and mused that she wouldn't want to be the one to make such a nice girl cry. Defeated by her perception, Harris admitted he couldn't contend with her, and she advised him not to make Tiana worry. He began to speak, but the guildmaster cut him off, reminding him that he would owe her even more now. Undeterred, Harris stated that he had a favor to ask. He then added with a confident smile that it would surely be more convenient for the guild if his debt to her grew larger. She had no problem with that logic. The guildmaster's expression shifted to a sharp, knowing grin. "Well said, you brat," she remarked, prompting him to state his request. He laid out his plan. He needed her to guard his house. He explained that while he hoped Zoe and the others would be charged for possessing counterfeit money, there was a risk. If Zoe revealed that he was the one who stole the fake money, the trouble could circle back to him. The guildmaster listened intently, hand on her chin, beginning to understand the scheme. He explains his concern to the guildmaster. Given the day's events, he fears his enemies might plant counterfeit money in his house to fabricate evidence. The guildmaster agrees, stating she will deploy whoever is available. Harris expresses his gratitude, noting that her help would be very useful. He prepares to leave. He remembers to thank her for the cookies from the other day. The guildmaster, sipping her tea, tells him that if their business is concluded, it's time for him to go home, adding that he shouldn't keep a girl waiting. Harris chuckles in agreement and turns it apart. She watches him go, telling him not to mention it and to give the girl her regards. Her expression then shifts to one of quiet contemplation. Sometime later, Harris arrives at his house nestled in the mountains. As he approaches, a voice calls out, "Master." He is met at the door by Tiana, who rushes to embrace him. He gently returns the hug, announcing he's home. With a bright, relieved smile, she welcomes him back. Inside, Asha, who is seated on a couch, also welcomes him back, though she notes that he is late. Harris apologizes, explaining that he got caught up in a conversation with a guildmaster. Asha seems to understand, simply remarking on a job well done. He sighs, admitting he's wasted a lot of time and energy on unnecessary things, and asks if there is any food left. Asia looks at him, questioning what he means by any food left. He clarifies that he hasn't eaten yet. Tiana then explains that she refused to eat without him, despite any protests. Hearing this, Harris' expression softens with affection, sighs and runs a hand through his hair, then turns to Tiana with a gentle smile. He apologizes for making her wait. A warm meal of soup and bread sits on the table before them. They eat. Harris mentions that they are running low on firewood and suggests they could go to the mountains. Tiana perks up at the idea, exclaiming that she wants to pick mushrooms. As night falls on their secluded home, Harris thinks that would be a nice activity, but notes they would need more people to help gather everything. Preparations are complete for a trip to the mountains. A wooden cart stands ready, loaded with a crate of tools, a bucket, and rope. Everything checked and accounted for. Tiana proudly holds up a wicker basket, confirming with a bright smile that the lunch is also packed. Young man, brimming with excitement, pumps his fist in the air and enthusiastically declares it's time to go. Beside him, Harris looks on with a weary, unimpressed expression, while Asha observes from the back of the car. Travel? Asia comments on the young man's high spirits so early in the morning. He turns to her with a wide, cheerful grin and confirms that, of course, he's in a great mood. Alight with pure joy. He reveals the reason for his excitement. He was invited by his big brother. This declaration piques Asha's interest, and she repeats the phrase, big brother, with a knowing smile. Tiana, overhearing them, glances toward Harris, her expression filled with curiosity. Asia turns to Harris, her smile turning teasing as she remarks on how much the young man clearly admires him. From his seat, Harris curtly tells her to shut up. Meanwhile, the young man finds an ally in Tiana, giving her a thumbs up and exclaiming that she truly understands. Tiana beams in agreement, declaring that their master is a wonderful man. The two formally introduce themselves with a firm handshake. He states that he is Kampa, his big brother's disciple. She, in turn, earnestly introduces herself as Tiana. As they sit together in the moving cart, Tiana turns to Asha and asks if she's also acquainted with Kampa. Asha confirms that she is, and Kampa adds that they were on a mission together once, along with Harris. She looks at Kampa with a stern expression, warning him that there won't be a second time. He agrees, sweating, and apologizes for the trouble he caused. His demeanor then shifts to one of fierce determination as he clenches his fists, vowing that this time he will properly fulfill his role as a vanguard. His sudden intensity draws a weary look from Harris, who asks why he is so anxious about their trip up the mountains today. Therefore, deep within the woods, a plan is made to divide their tasks. Kampa explains the arrangement. He and Harris will gather firewood, while Tiana and Gina will be responsible for picking mushrooms. Upon hearing her assignment, Tiana cheerfully announces she's off and starts to run ahead. Harris quickly stops her, calling out for both her and Gina to wait a minute and come over to him. A moment later, a length of rope is carefully tied, securing one into a wrist and the other to the sash of a dress. Gina holds the other end of the rope, explaining to a dismayed Tiana that this will prevent them from getting lost or separated. Tiana is not pleased with the arrangement, thinking to herself that she feels like a dog. Before the two groups part ways, Harris gives a final warning that you never know what you'll find on the mountain roads. Tiana quietly acknowledges that she understands. Gina then turns to her and says it's time to go mushroom hunting, to which Tiana meekly agrees. Harris then addresses his brother, stating that they should go get some firewood too. Copper responds with an enthusiastic, "Yes, sir." As I walk through these woods, Compass suddenly calls out, "Master!" Harris immediately halts, his expression turning hard and serious as he stares intently at something unseen ahead. His attention was drawn from the potential danger in the woods by Tiana's excited cry. She held up a large mushroom, proudly declaring that she had found it immediately. She asked if it was the same kind sold in the stores, and he could only let out a surprised sound of affirmation. Gina approached, remarking that the mushroom was delicious. Hearing this, Tiana's excitement grew, and she insisted that they had to pick a lot of it. With that, she eagerly ran off into the woods, pulling the still tethered Gina along with her. Gina called out a warning, telling her to be careful not to fall over. Watching the two from a distance, Kampa commented on what a cheerful girl Tiana was, and Harris agreed. Kampa then asked if Harris and the girl lived together. When Harris confirmed, Kampa fell silent, thoughtfully processing the information. As he hefted a log onto his shoulder, Harris felt the need to clarify the situation, stating firmly that Tiana was not his daughter. From off-panel, Kampa replied that he hadn't said anything. She continued, explaining that Tiana was his employee, holding an axe. Kampa admitted with a slight smile that he had, in fact, assumed she was his daughter. He now understood. That was why she called Harris master. With a grunt of effort, he swung the axe, splitting a log cleanly in two. He then turned to Harris, his expression suddenly intense. He demanded to know how far things had gone with Nason, with Gina. Harris looked baffled by the question. Kampa pressed on asking what it meant that they lived together. Harris explained plainly that he was just renting a room. Papa was incredulous, shouting in disbelief that they lived under the same roof, and yet nothing had happened. He added that Tiana was there as well, as if her presence made the situation even more unbelievable. Harris calmly confirmed that was the case. Papa's demeanor shifted entirely. With a sly look, he asked if Harris would mind if he pursued Gina. Harris simply told him to suit himself. Kampa admitted he'd been aiming for Gina all along, musing that she was beautiful, cool, and seemed vulnerable with a nice style. Harris listened with a knowing smirk. Suddenly, Harris' head snapped to the side, his attention caught by a faint, distant sound. He immediately raised a finger to his lips, silencing Kampa, who was still speaking about Gina. Harris's focus was entirely elsewhere. His brow furrowed as he strained to identify the sound. He realized with a jolt it was the sound of footsteps. His realization was confirmed a moment later when a desperate cry echoed through the trees. It was Gina's voice shouting his name with alarming urgency. Recognizing the voice instantly, Campa cried out as he and Harris sprinted towards the sound. Through the trees, they caught sight of Gina and Tiana standing together in a small clearing. They drew closer. The source of the danger became clear. Gina and Tiana were cornered by three rough-looking men armed and menacing. Tiana, standing beside Gina, could feel a palpable malice emanating from them. Harris took in the scene, his expression hardening as he assessed the threat.